I became a planet. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Flamestone. Now, except for the lizardman he met at the beginning, the Black Wolf tribe that was destroyed, and the sheep tribe just now, Guo Sen found that the remaining civilizations all knew what fire was for. The group of dwarves in the cave was no exception. However, in front of Guo Sen, the more than 10 tiny flames proved that this group of dwarves had an alternative civilization. They seemed to have made lamps. In other words, they made something similar to candles. In Guo Sen's sight, under the burning flames was a black rope, and the other end was soaked in lamp oil like water. The lamp oil was soaked in a metal bowl with not too delicate workmanship, which also told Guo Sen that this group of dwarves also had a very powerful smelting process. Lamps. This is a new technology after the development of fire. Its principle is the same as that of torches, but there is no need to worry about burning out at any time. Just fill it with lamp oil every once in a while. This undoubtedly makes full use of the characteristics of fire and can be widely used in quite a few fields. For example, take it to the deep mines to find the ruby-like ore. Compared with the previous dwarves, they did not seem to shift their focus to hunting and gathering fruits, but use the trade with the sheep people to save this part of time and focus on mining and developing the tribe. They know how to use resources better than any previous race. Otherwise, there would not be so many people, right? In Guo Sen's sight, there were nearly 600 or 700 dwarves squatting on the ground and talking about something. This also included women and children. It seems that their population is really large. He moved his mind and used his ability. Chief, the food we got from them is enough for us to sneak into deeper areas. Yes, Chief, these dried meats are enough for us to eat for a longer time. As long as we find more flamestones, they will give us more food. But we can't go down anymore. Some brothers disappeared in there before. What if? Yes, Chief, I think it's okay to keep the status quo. Guo Sen heard their voices immediately. It seems that, as he guessed, this group of dwarves seemed to have established a cycle in civilization. That is, using gems to obtain food, and then using food to find more gems. This seems to be a virtuous cycle. As long as the sheep people like gems, the mining industry of the dwarves will gradually become more developed, and their race will become more prosperous. As for the sheep people, they will raise more animals and mine more rock salt, and they can also make progress. The premise is that the sheep people can maintain their continued interest in gems. However, this is a false proposition. Guo Sen couldn't know what the sheep people who couldn't speak meant. Otherwise, he could also judge for these dwarves whether to continue in the future. Everyone, stop talking. I have my own judgment. If there is no objection, we will go down now to find more flamestones. The dwarf who looked the most burly interrupted the noise made by the crowd, and his strong voice seemed unusually present. Understood. The answers were mixed, but they had to obey the leader's words. The dwarves stood up one after another. After they walked out of the cave, they brought lamps, dried meat, wooden sticks and a large number of metal pickaxes, and came to a cave hidden at the bottom of a huge rock. Guo Sen suddenly felt that what these dwarves did was not what a tribe with a mature civilization should do. How come all the people in the tribe have to go to mine? Don't they do something else? Even pick some wild fruits and make weapons? However, his eyes followed them and entered the mine. The mine was not wide, and the diameter of the mine was only about 2 meters. There was no luminous moss on the rock wall that the sheep people had. The dwarves could only hold the lamp and slowly move down a not steep slope. Guo Sen looked at the rock wall and found that it seemed to be naturally formed, and it became so smooth and flat after being developed by the dwarves. The further the dwarves went, the fewer traces of human intervention in the mine were. In the end, there were only a lot of stalactites and other landforms left. After a while, the dwarves finally stopped, and Guo Sen found that they came to a vast underground space. Unlike the rock salt mine of the sheep people, this space does not have a very high cave ceiling, nor does it have a flat ground. There are only countless huge rocks, which are everywhere in sight. In a corner of this space, there is a tunnel that seems to be naturally formed, extending to the bottom. Maybe this is the deeper that the dwarves said. Guo Sen noticed that many huge rocks with a diameter of nearly 5 or 6 meters have been broken on the rock wall of this huge space, and things like gravel inside are scattered all over the ground. To be honest, this mine is completely unsafe. It only takes some not so strong earthquakes, and I believe this place will soon become the grave of this group of dwarves. However, it is Guo Sen himself who can control the earthquake. As long as he does not deliberately do bad things, these dwarves can still mine here forever. Do those gravel-like stones really contain the so-called flame stone? Guo Sen decided not to leave here for the time being. He wanted to take a good look at how these dwarves mined. When he was on that land before, he didn't look closely at what kind of work mining was, but now that he finally followed, he might as well take a good look. What if this advanced mining technology can be brought to other civilizations in the future? This is very necessary. The dwarves immediately scattered, with 20 people in a team, lit torches with lights, and placed them beside them, and began to knock on the rock wall with metal picks. The clanging sound caused an echo, making this originally quiet space suddenly much more lively. Guo Sen observed them carefully. The rock wall seemed to be quite thick. Guo Sen saw that they not only had metal picks, but also small metal hammers and wedges to destroy the stronger rock wall. The rocks were constantly peeling off, but Guo Sen knew that the red so-called flamestone was still buried deeper. Otherwise, get them all out. Guo Sen knew very well that the content of red gems in the rock layer they were in was not much. What they said before that there might be flamestones in the deeper part was completely a fantasy. Guo Sen checked and found that there was almost nothing in the deeper part. Oxygen is the biggest enemy that restricts this dwarven mining team. Chief. After working for several hours, the dwarves seemed to be a little impatient. They had been digging for such a long time, but they didn't even see the appearance of the ore. Don't stop, keep going, the leader commanded, and he also understood the current situation. The ancestors have dug here countless times, and they are also repeating the process. Is there still a flamestone in this mine? No one can be sure. At this point, can we only go to the deeper mine? But, Chief, we think we have to go deeper, otherwise, who knows? Guo. A roar that seemed to be made by a wild beast suddenly resounded throughout the mine. Chapter 52 Things that should not appear. Wild beasts. Guo Sen was also stunned. In his opinion, there would be no wild beasts in such a place. There were no plants in the underground with thin oxygen, and there were no other creatures except these dwarves. Everywhere you looked, there were only stones. In this environment, there were wild beasts. Guo Sen did not think he was hallucinating, and the same was true for the dwarves. The probability of wild beasts existing here was really infinitely close to zero. But what was that roar just now? AHH. As if afraid that everyone would misunderstand that someone was hungry, the roar of the beast sounded again, and it seemed that there was more than one. The dwarves were like sculptures, stiff and motionless. They all stared at the leader who was also in doubt, waiting for the next instruction. Guo Sen did not idle to look at the expressions of the dwarves. He followed the direction of the roar and aimed his sight at the mine tunnel further down. His sight continued to move forward, and when Guo Sen saw the appearance of the beast, he could not help but be surprised. Dinosaur? It was impossible to be wrong. These 3-meter tall, scale-covered bipedal monsters with lizard heads, golden pupils, and countless blade-like teeth. What else could they be but dinosaurs? But why do dinosaurs still exist? Why do they still exist hundreds of meters underground? There is absolutely no logic. Logically, dinosaurs should have been extinct. They should have died out during the days when Guo Sen was sleeping. He instantly remembered the turtle dragons with shells on the floating ice on the sea surface. Aren't they also dinosaurs? Could it be that there are still a large number of dinosaurs in every corner of his sphere? Garrrrrrrr. The roar of the dinosaurs, like a death curse floating from hell, made the dwarves go from surprise to fear, and then to panic and despair. Hurry, run. The leader shouted. He had already seen the terrifying monsters sticking their heads out of the mine with the help of the firelight. Under the dim light, these ugly monsters looked even more terrifying. The dwarves panicked and even threw their tools on the ground and crawled down to the mine. But these dinosaurs were faster. They bit a dwarf's foot at lightning speed, and the sharp nails on their short and thick front claws instantly pierced a terrifying blood hole in the crying dwarf's body. Torn wounds, squeezed internal organs, broken bones, desperate screams. In just a few seconds, the dwarf's life was extinguished miserably. However, the three dinosaurs were not satisfied with this prey. They wanted to kill all the moving pieces of meat. At this time, Guo Sen was watching coldly. He could have pinched the necks of these dinosaurs and thrown them back to where they came out one by one, and used his ability to send the dwarves back to the ground in a short time. If he wanted, it would be extremely simple to crush and eat all the dinosaurs. However, he did not do so. It was also at this time that the dinosaurs caught the second and third prey. With extremely creepy screams, they also became delicious food. Guo Sen felt from the beginning that these dwarves seemed to be too dependent on the flamestone. For this reason, they even gave up looking for food, gave up the correct use of fire, and even let the whole tribe run out to mine. After all, as long as they found this rare gem, the sheep people would trade with them and provide dried meat that could be eaten for a long time. Compared with these dwarves, the sheep people's civilization was a little backward, but they did not have any dependence on the necessities of life. Even if the dwarves did not give them gems, these guys could do whatever they had to do. As for the dwarves, as long as the sheep people stopped trading, what awaited these fat guys was death. This was not alarmist. Guo Sen felt that this kind of thing was very likely. Who can guarantee that the sheep people's taste will not change? Will it last forever? What awaits the dwarves at that time is a reality that is more terrifying than these three dinosaurs. Here, the dinosaurs may only kill a dozen dwarves, but if the sheep people refuse to trade, all of their 600 or 700 people will have to be explained. The appearance of this dinosaur also did what Guo Sen wanted to do, break the dwarves' obsession with the flamestone. Although it is unknown why these terrifying monsters can survive underground, they did play a role. At this time, several more dwarves screamed. Guo Sen saw that the remaining dwarves were crying and rushing towards the exit. They seemed to have no time to care about anything. They even threw away their metal picks and oil lamps and stumbled away along the dark cave tunnel. Due to fear and panic, and the inability to see anything, these dwarves caused a serious stampede in the tunnel, and more than a dozen dwarves were completely silent. The dinosaurs did not seem to be satisfied with simply eating their prey. They seemed to prefer the feeling of hunting dwarves. Using their speed and sharp teeth and claws, they quickly killed several more dwarves, and then attacked new targets. Guo Sen felt that this was a bit too much. The dwarves had learned enough lessons, including the leader, including those in the tunnel. Nearly 50 or 60 dwarves have died. If the dinosaurs are allowed to kill, I'm afraid the dwarfs will not be able to recover in decades. With a thought, the dinosaurs were immediately restrained. They were like sculptures. Even if they wanted to break free from this control, they could not do it. Under their claws, the few dwarves who had saved their lives rolled and crawled towards the cave exit screaming. Guo Sen looked at the corpses all over the ground and the red blood that soaked the rocks, and waited quietly for the dwarves to escape from the mine completely. After a while, he checked all the corpses and found that none of them could move, so he turned his sights to the dinosaurs. What kind of living environment do these creatures that suddenly appeared hundreds of meters underground have? Logically speaking, their existence is a paradox. As cold-blooded animals, dinosaurs should not be able to exist in such a harsh environment. So, where did they come from? Guo Sen controlled the three dinosaurs and walked towards the place where they came out, which was a tunnel that seemed to be naturally formed deeper. At the beginning, it was almost pitch black, but after walking nearly 100 meters, the slope suddenly rose sharply. As he continued to move forward, Guo Sen suddenly saw many more bones, metal picks and extinguished torches on the ground. He didn't need to identify them carefully to know that these were the remains of the dwarves. They should be the missing companions they mentioned before. These dwarves ran to a deeper place for the flamestone, but they were found by the dinosaurs and became a delicious meal delivered to their doorstep. It was really greed that caused trouble. Guo Sen sighed and suddenly found that the light in the cave that was constantly moving upward suddenly became much stronger. What's going on? Light? Moss? No, this is obviously a stronger and more natural light. As his sight moved forward, the intensity of the light reached its maximum, and the cave entrance was right in front of him. And outside the cave entrance, an incredible scene appeared. I'm really sorry. Due to a mistake, I deleted the 50-second chapter 1 had written before and put the saved draft directly in. I was really confused while editing the text. Special thanks to the book friend, Chuang Shikilin, for his corrections. Thank you. Chapter 53 Fantasy. Guo Sen saw a strange picture. Outside the cave exit was the interior of a completely dormant volcanic crater. The light of the stars shone through the huge gap that had erupted hot magma in ancient times, shining on countless ferns of various shapes. They bathed in the light and grew unscrupulously, forming a vast jungle. In the jungle, there were countless mirror-like lakes formed by water gushing out from the ground, and even underground rivers gushing out from the ground, connecting the lakes and flowing slowly. The calls of various wonderful and novel animals came one after another in the forest. Guo Sen saw that there were tens of thousands of dinosaurs and various strange-looking creatures living here. In this isolated paradise, the animals and plants have not been affected by the changes in the outside environment. They have maintained their appearance in ancient times, worked hard to survive, and have been multiplying and living until now. Guo Sen suddenly remembered that he had heard before that a unique ecosystem would be formed in such a relatively closed environment, but he did not expect that this situation would appear on his sphere. He looked at the cave again and found that it seemed to be the nest of these dinosaurs. There were a lot of branches and other things piled up in it. I'm afraid that the dwarves had dug to the depth of that large space before, and the noise they made the dinosaurs discover it. They also went down all the way, smelled the smell of the dwarves, and finally got an unexpected meal. It was probably the same this time. The greedy dwarves made more noise, which caused the dinosaurs to take risks again, and won rich results, losing 1/5 of the population of the tribe, and even the leader was killed. This dwarf tribe must have been shrouded in the shadow of dinosaurs for a long time, and dared not go down the mine again, right? However, you can't think too absolutely. Guo Sen decided that, before observing this small world in the crater carefully, he had to deal with the dwarves' affairs first. Let them give up the idea of continuing to dig for the flamestone here, and go hunting, or find fruits and dig tree roots, smelt metals, etc., and do something serious. Don't think about digging gems and trading food with the sheep tribe every day. This kind of abnormal transaction is not what Guo Sen wants to see. Think about the compatriots of these dwarves on another piece of land. That is the normal development of civilization. Barter is indeed quite advanced, but it appeared too early, and it was too abnormal. His sight came to the underground mine in the cave. After checking and confirming that there were no living dwarves in the entire mining cave, he moved his mind and blocked the entrance of the dwarf mine with countless extremely hard boulders, completely closing the tunnel leading to the underground space. In this way, even if they dared to come over, they couldn't do it. Unless they have more advanced smelting technology, they can knock open all the rocks nearby with their obsession to find the extremely small amount of flamestone that already exists in the rock layer. When that time comes, what awaits them may be endless despair, right? Of course, there is also a reason to protect the small ecosystem in the crater. Guo Sen didn't know how long this easily destroyed ecosystem could last, but in a short period of time, Guo Sen wanted to see if the animals and plants that survived tenaciously in it would produce any new evolution. He had missed a long period of time before, and had not observed the specific process of how the lizardmen, white wolves, dwarves and sheep people evolved from animals to humans. But now that there is such a closed ecosystem, maybe it is not impossible for him to really observe it. After Guo Sen did a good job of completely sealing the cave, he looked at the dwarves again, only to find that these guys had completely abandoned the caves, where they had lived before and actually migrated collectively. This was unexpected. He thought that these dwarves would still live in this place and slowly recuperate. But after careful consideration, this is indeed a reasonable and inevitable choice. After going down the mine this time, they lost more than 60 people, most of whom were still in their prime, including the leader of the tribe. All the lights, metal picks and dried meat were buried underground. Even if Guo Sen hadn't blocked the hole, they would never dare to go down to search. After all, there were 3 terrifying monsters waiting below. Without food and tools to continue mining gems, the dwarves had to find a new habitat, and they also had to worry about food for tonight. Guo Sen didn't expect that the dinosaurs could force the dwarves to this extent, but the development of things would inevitably lead to such a result. Of course, if the dwarves have opened up a new tribe and started to prosper again, this disaster would be a good thing. But if they are unable to recover from this, completely unable to adapt to the sudden change of life, and even eventually become a passerby in the civilized era, it only proves that they can't adapt to this world. Similarly, if it weren't for this disaster, they would probably continue to follow the same path after the sheep people lost interest in gems. No world will adapt to people, only people adapt to this world. The strong prey on the weak. Only the stronger ones have more chances of survival. The weaker ones, or those like these dwarves who rely entirely on the sheep people for food, will eventually perish completely if they do not want to change. They will become the abandoned children of civilization and disappear in the torrent of time. The dwarves were lucky. After a whole day of trekking, they did not encounter any danger. They finally came to a valley with a slowly flowing stream and stopped. Guo Sen was relieved when he saw them start picking nearby fruits. This area seemed a little dry, there was not much food, and the soil was relatively poor, but it was relatively safe. Guo Sen had noticed before that around the sheep tribe, there were a group of creatures similar to tigers and leopards, which seemed to be chasing and hunting other animals. And that kind of carnivore had also been active in the area where the dwarf tribe was before. But after arriving in this river valley, Guo Sen did not find any traces of them, which was probably related to the fact that there were not many herbivores in this area. The dwarves also had a few remaining metal pickaxes in their hands, and the men began to dig the mountain of the river valley that was dozens of meters high. The women and children were concentrating on picking fruits, and some brave ones went into the water, seemingly looking for some fish to eat. Seeing that the dwarf tribe had settled down, Guo Sen was completely relieved. At least they had not completely forgotten how to survive. The future is prepared for the strong, as long as they have not forgotten what strength is. A friend's new book, very interesting. You can collect it and invest in it. Chapter 54, The Forgotten Land. Guo Sen traced the river back to its source, and found that the areas it passed through seemed to be places with abundant rainfall and dense tributaries. No wonder the entire river was almost located in the valley. This was not a good thing for the dwarves downstream. He began to use his abilities. He cut off and redirected dozens of tributaries, separated the main river into several channels in the area where the dwarves were, and diverted some of the water to meet a few hundred meters away. In this way, even if a heavy rain came without his attention, this river, which had become less water and slow in flow, would not suddenly rise in water levels and drown the dwarves and feed the fish. Of course, Guo Sen also knew that the dwarves had traveled a long distance to almost the center of the land, and they must have considerable experience in dealing with such things. They would not be so stupid as to build the caves they dug too close to the water surface. He came back to check, and it was true. The entire valley was nearly 50 meters high, and the caves dug by the dwarves were about 20 meters away. Most of this place is made of crispy mountains similar to limestone. The dwarves hardly used much effort, and they had already dug out a very deep passage before Guo Sen came back. It seems that they may really be the remnants of the dwarves on the previous land, and even the height of the cave is not much different. This height can not only prevent floods caused by the sudden surge of the river water, but also avoid wild beasts that come to find food without knowing it. It is a very smart choice of location. However, before the cave is finally dug, it seems that they can only camp. Guo Sen saw that the dwarves had brought a lot of hay and found some branches from nearby and put them on the river bank some distance away from the river. With some more black stones in their hands, they seemed to start a fire. Guo Sen did not observe carefully how the White Wolf clan made fire before, and he did not notice the dwarves on another continent either. Now seeing the behavior of the dwarves here, it seems that they understand how they have preserved the fire, since they had fire. Flints collide and sparks appear, and then let the sparks splash onto flammable objects to ignite flames, if it were really that simple. After a long time of struggling, the sweaty dwarves finally ignited the pile of hay, and hurriedly picked up branches and other things, and put them into the fire. Guo Sen saw that they began to put things like tree roots into the fire. It seems that they have become accustomed to cooked food. However, they are already somewhat dependent on salt, and it may take some time for them to adapt to tasteless food. Seeing this, Guo Sen felt that the dwarfs should have settled down and prepared the environment for them. The rest depends on them. Whether it is life or death, whether civilization is destroyed or revived, Guo Sen can no longer interfere. He just hopes that the dwarves can forget the previous habits and will not evolve civilization in a distorted direction. Even if it is like now, degenerating into an extremely simple and backward living state, it is much better than that. As for the future, it all depends on their own luck. After leaving the dwarves, Guo Sen returned to the crater. He soon found the dinosaurs that had attacked the dwarves, but he also found that there were many new bones in the dinosaurs' nests. These were obviously the dwarves who were bitten and trampled to death by the dinosaurs in the underground space. This reminded him of the scene at that time. Guo Sen sighed in his heart. Just eat them. He had no intention of burying the bones of these dwarves. They were just the part that was eaten in the ecosystem. There was no need. If the dwarves from another continent encountered these 3 dinosaurs, maybe they would win. They were seriously trying to find food, instead of chasing the trivial things like those people. Guo Sen's sight moved forward in the fern forest, and countless insects, small animals, and dinosaurs kept appearing. He estimated the area here, which was actually not large, only about 10 square kilometers. The reason why he didn't find this place when he looked down from the sky to look for intelligent creatures before was that he subconsciously believed that there would be nothing in the crater. He also observed carefully that the dinosaurs were not big, and there were no behemoths of several dozen meters in size. There were more carnivorous dinosaurs of about 3 meters in size, like the one that attacked the dwarf, and there were also a large number of herbivorous dinosaurs. However, they all seemed to have evolved some wonderful characteristics. Guo Sen had dug up some fossils when he was looking for dinosaurs before. He remembered that there were monsters with 3 or 4 eyes. He didn't expect to see the real thing here. Herbivorous dinosaurs all have more than 3 eyes, which can observe any movement at short and medium distances very quickly. Moreover, they all look very strong and like to live in groups. With the size of the small dinosaur that attacked the dwarf, it is almost impossible to attack them. Maybe as soon as they run over there, they will be discovered and beaten. The reason why the ecosystem in this crater has not been destroyed is probably because of this aspect. He suddenly wanted to give this place a name. The Forgotten Land. This is a place forgotten by time and the outside world. In the almost completely closed dormant crater, there is an extremely unique natural ecosystem. Plenty of rainfall, high temperature and high humidity. Guo Sen felt that it was not just a greenhouse effect. He might have controlled the active volcano from erupting, and the magma was moving underneath, which was also the reason for the high temperature. However, since this place has such a unique ecosystem, do other volcanic craters in the world have similar ones? This seems quite interesting. He immediately focused his attention on the craters around the world and checked all the craters that were not erupting. However, contrary to expectations, except for this one, there seemed to be only one volcano on another piece of land that he had never been to in the world, which had almost the same ecosystem. However, compared to the forgotten land in this crater, Guo Sen was more interested in another thing. Is that dwarfs? No, dwarfs' arms and legs are not so slender. What kind of human is it? He couldn't help but mutter in his heart. They were wearing clothes that looked like they were made of large leaves, and they were busy collecting something in the mud beside a fairly wide river. Guo Sen zoomed in and found that he should take back some of his words. These people who are working with their backs bent are not human-like beings, but humans who look almost exactly like humans on Earth. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Evolution of Civilization. Whether from the facial features, limbs, or even behavior, these are almost the same as the Earthlings. Guo Sen used to really think that the dwarves might be the only race on his planet that looked like Earthlings. Unexpectedly, on this continent, by chance, on the bank of the river next to the crater, he found these guys. What is the probability of evolving into a human? Guo Sen felt that this could not even be calculated by mathematical probability. Could it be that all planets with similar environments to the Earth will evolve intelligent creatures with similar appearances to Earthlings? Or is this just a very pitiful probability? This is really a mystery. In the evolution of life, will there eventually be a place for humans in the line of intelligent creatures? However, after the excitement, Guo Sen calmed down and found that these humans were not completely similar to Earthlings. Obviously, their cheekbones are higher, their heads are smaller, and their hair is thicker. They don't walk completely upright, and their arms don't seem to be as symmetrical as those of Earthlings. They feel a bit like gibbons, and their bodies are slightly fat. Perhaps, is this because they have not yet fully evolved into a human-like form? Or will it be like this in the future? Guo Sen is not sure, and it will take time to prove it. However, with intelligent creatures that are extremely similar to Earthlings, Guo Sen is more excited than when he saw the dwarves before. He feels that, if these humans need it, he will try his best to bring them more advanced civilizations. Lizardman hunting techniques, white wolf sentry towers and fences, dwarf advanced smelting technology, sheepman breeding. As long as these humans don't have them, Guo Sen will teach them carefully and patiently. Partiality. Guo Sen knows that he does have such an impulse when he encounters intelligent creatures that are more similar to Earthlings. Compared with other races, Guo Sen really wants to raise the civilization of these humans to a higher level. If he had a lizard head before he became a planet, he would certainly be more partial to lizardmen. What is this psychology? He doesn't know, but there should be nothing wrong in thinking this way. Compared with other races, the appearance of humans is more intimate to him. Of course, this partiality is limited. That is, try not to pull the civilization of humans too far away from the civilization of other races. In that case, it would be like a reprint of the enslavement and slaughter of the natives by the conquerors after the discovery of the New World. He will try to be fairer. After all, everyone is a people of his own planet. Guo Sen thought for a while and began to observe these humans carefully, wanting to see how far their civilization has progressed. As a result, he suddenly found that what they were collecting seemed to be some kind of short green leafy plants, and these green leafy plants seemed to grow. Somewhat neat. He took a good look at this large area of plants growing on the riverbank with fertile soil. Isn't it true that, if the growth of general plants has no rules at all, and grows wherever they are caught, the plants collected by these humans, although not completely parallel, are also quite neat? And then again, why do these humans want to pull these plants? Not fruits, not tree roots, why plants? Could it be that? Is this a dish? A vegetable? Or is it planted? Guo Sen began to guess boldly. After all, after thinking about it, this is the only possibility. Humans who can grow vegetables. Just thinking about it makes me feel very powerful. This means that they can plow the land, sow seeds, water, and harvest, using the fertile land by the river to achieve self-sufficiency in farming. Isn't this a fairly advanced civilization? However, Guo Sen was not too excited. After all, this was just a guess. What if it wasn't? However, after seeing these humans tie the picked leaves with thin hay and put them at their feet and chew them from time to time, Guo Sen believed his guess. These humans are really serious. Do they already have a primitive farming civilization? Guo Sen suddenly felt that these humans seemed to be much more awesome than the previous humanoids. With an agricultural civilization, it means that ordinary ways of obtaining food such as hunting and gathering fruits and tree roots can no longer meet their growing needs. That is to say, They have a considerable population. With the explosion of population, there will be more needs. More food, more clothes, and more spiritual needs. Improved tools, more advanced smelting technology, evolution of weapons. Guo Sen didn't dare to think about it. The picture was too beautiful. If that was the case, even if he didn't intervene, these humans would become the highest point of civilization on the entire planet. With excitement, he watched the humans slowly get up from their fields and pick up the vegetables. There was a strange thing by the field, which was a raft made of several wooden boards tied together with straw ropes. There was a layer of baffles around the raft, and the whole thing looked like a wooden cart. The humans carried the vegetables into the cart. Then, they led a strange creature from the grass by the river. On the flat head covered with brown hair, the big eyes on both sides were extremely eye-catching. The black pupils kept looking around, and a mouth full of flat teeth was still chewing plants. On its head, there was a pair of horns that soared into the sky. The animal was crawling on the ground with its limbs, and its short tail was more than 2 meters long, but its height was only a little more than half a meter. The overall image was more like a turtle without a shell. However, its body seemed to be extremely strong, and the strong muscle lines on its front and back limbs and tail showed everything. A straw rope was tied to the neck of the turtle without a shell, and it seemed very strong. The humans put the bucket on it. One person was responsible for pulling it in front, and 2 people were supporting it on both sides of the front of the car. The turtle without a shell was led forward obediently. Have they even mastered the technology of domestication? To what extent have these humans evolved civilization? Guo Sen was getting more and more excited. It seemed that he could foresee that these humans who constantly surprised him would have a more powerful civilization in the future. On their route, Guo Sen saw more vegetable fields and blue tuberous plants growing in them, or fruit trees with small red flowers and heart-shaped fruits. One after another, the shellless trolleys came out of the fields, forming a curved and colorful team. Moving further away, Guo Sen aimed his eyes forward, and not far away, dozens of smoke curled up, and he seemed to smell something. That must be the human tribe, right? Let me say sorry to everyone first. Those who followed me from the Book of Succulents may know that my main business is selling succulents. When I took the car to pick up the goods today, I was unfortunately car sick. I vomited for a long time and felt dizzy. I didn't recover all day today. My physical fitness has always been not very good. Looking at the poor manuscripts saved, I found that there was only this chapter because of the revision. So after thinking about it, I still think that health is important. Don't collapse. If you collapse, don't say 2 or 1 updates. It's possible to stop updating. After all, I'm old. Hahaha. I decided to apologize to everyone first, and I will update once today. When I feel better tomorrow, I will make up for today's and dedicate a total of 3 updates to everyone. In addition, tomorrow's score will be strong, which is also the result of everyone's support. I'm very grateful here. No more talking. I'm going to lie down for a while. Chapter 56. Not in accordance with the rules. Seeking recommendation votes. Farming, tool making, domestication, and the use of fire. This is one aspect of the civilization displayed by this primitive tribe that constantly surprises Guo Senator. They can grow vegetables and fruit trees, make tools for transportation, and tame animals to help with transportation. Of course, Guo Sen has learned about the basic technology of primitive civilization, fire, from the smoke from their cooking. He really wants to know how far these primitive people will evolve their primitive civilization. Are there more advanced technologies? Guo Sen's sight gradually moves closer to the direction of the cooking smoke. It is a tribe located on a flat grassland. Neat and tall wooden fences surround a huge flatland, and in this flatland, there are hundreds of buildings that can be called exquisite. Stones, wooden boards and ropes are neatly combined to outline small houses. A large number of primitive people are sitting in front of dozens of fires, constantly filling them with dry branches. On the fire, there is something that Guo Sen has never seen in other tribes. A huge shell of a fruit of an unknown plant. It was barrel shaped, with a hole on each side. 2 strong ropes passed through the hole and tied it up, and the other end was hung on a wooden stick as thick as the men's arms. The two ends of the nearly 2-meter long wooden stick were placed on two thick branches that were stuck in the ground in a Y shape. This was a simple cooking combination. In the shell of the fruit whose skin had been burned black, bubbles were rolling, and white smoke was constantly coming out. It was obviously water. The primitive people who transported vegetables and fruits drove the shellless turtle to transport the goods to the tribe, and then someone distributed the food near each fire. Guo Sen saw that each primitive person began to throw a large amount of vegetables and fruits into the boiling water. Then, they picked up another thing that surprised Guo Senator. It was a bowl-shaped object that seemed to be made of clay or something. The inner layer was a little smooth and covered with fine cracks. This was undoubtedly a kind of pottery. Primitive people, even this is mastered. Awesome. After a while, the vegetables and fruits softened in the boiling water and turned into a paste. At this time, someone took down the pot that was carrying them, along with the wooden stick on it. Guo Sen noticed that someone else used something similar to a ladle to scoop out the paste and poured it into the pottery bowls. All the primitive people stared at the steaming food with extremely eager eyes, and they couldn't stop drooling. Is it so delicious? Guo Sen didn't understand at all what was so delicious about this paste. Just like a nightmare advertisement, he remembered, a little boy was looking forward to a vendor selling black sesame paste, and finally bought a bowl, ate it up, and licked it up. These primitive people ignored the heat and licked the fruit and vegetable paste clean, and the pottery bowls were covered with paste. One bowl after another. The primitive people started a paste carnival, and finally they couldn't eat anymore, and they were so satisfied that they lay on the ground, holding their bloated stomachs. Guo Sen was very confused. Is this thing really that delicious? And, are you full just by eating this? Just eating vegetables and fruits? Or cooked into a paste? What's going on? Could it be that the animal resources in this area are very scarce? Can't hunt at all? Can't eat meat? Guo Sen widened his sight with doubts. He looked carefully at the grassland, riverside, and forest closest to the tribe. Various novel and touching animals kept appearing in front of Guo Senator. Their number seemed to be extremely large, and there were many species of both carnivores and herbivores. Some of them didn't even care about the primitive people. They staggered and jumped in the tribe, as if they were entering their own home. Looking more carefully, countless birds also lived nearby, and some were still drilling in the tangled hair on the primitive people's heads. What kind of ghost scene is this? Are these animals all pets of the primitive people? Or do the primitive people already have the technology to build a natural wildlife park? Or did the primitive people choose the tribe in the zoo? This is ridiculous. Are the animals and birds not afraid of the primitive people? Guo Sen turned his sight to the tribe again, carefully looking for what should appear. Weapons. Stone blades, stone axes, stone spears, stone swords. We have them all. Why don't you use them to deal with those fat and strong animals? Did you make weapons just for defense? Guo Sen had already thought of 138 alpacas. What's going on? Could it be that? No, this should be impossible. It doesn't conform to the law of development. Guo Sen didn't want to think that his dangerous idea was true. Maybe the primitive people only ate fruit and vegetable porridge occasionally? One day, 2 days. Guo Sen watched the primitive people go out early and come back late, picking fruits and vegetables, transporting, eating porridge, and resting. More than 10 days passed. Even if an animal really fell into the fire by accident, or threw itself into the pot directly, the primitive people would pick them out, and even make a new pot of porridge. Guo Sen finally understood, and had to admit a fact. These primitive people who were most in line with the image of human beings in his mind, were pure vegetarians. What kind of concept is this? In this world with extremely backward productivity, if primitive people cannot get the most important thing, they should get protein, then it is impossible for their bodies to become stronger. After all, Guo Sen did not see these people eating bird eggs, which means that they have almost no channels to take in sufficient nutrition. Even if those vegetables, root plants and fruits really contain a lot of protein, it cannot completely offset their consumption. On the contrary, it may be the large amount of starch in those things that makes them a little fat. This is completely incomparable with modern humans on Earth. Modern Earthlings can choose to eat raw meat or eat some food that doesn't look clean, or even choose pure vegetarian food, which is supported by a very strong medical system and science and technology. Without these different dietary choices are nonsense. And these primitive people in front of them have obviously deviated from the rules. In this barbaric era, choosing to eat pure vegetarian food has resulted in such a large tribe has less than 500 people. Logically speaking, since there are agricultural civilizations and related technologies to support them, they should have at least thousands of talents. Moreover, the low demand for meat also hindered their motivation to develop smelting technology, and they didn't even have weapons of basic strength, not to mention mining and the like. Guo Sen pondered, how should he guide this race? Chapter 57, For Happiness, please recommend. Compared with other races encountered before, primitive humans are obviously more difficult. They use fire, but do not hunt wild animals close at hand to use their meat to supplement the energy they lack in their bodies. Either they never thought about eating meat and were used to eating fruits and plants, or they chose to refuse to eat meat because of something that happened. Guo Sen felt that it was necessary to understand it well. If these primitive humans can solve the problem of eating meat, then quite a lot of civilization technologies will be unlocked one after another. Hunting is necessary to eat meat, and a lot of physical strength will be consumed in the process of hunting, making their bodies more symmetrical. After capturing prey, they will also replace the broken leaves on their bodies with fur to make warmer and more comfortable clothes. I believe that things like bone needles will also be invented. When the number of animals becomes smaller, they can also go to the river to develop the fishing industry. Stone products are definitely useless against ferocious beasts, and they will slowly look for more powerful things, such as copper or iron. When the scale of productivity is up, they can do more things. Try to expand the population, gradually expand the sphere of influence, conquer a wider continent. The seemingly small matter of eating meat actually involves quite a lot of problems. For example, the lizardmen ate meat from the beginning. Guo Sen only needed to teach them the basic knowledge of using fire and smelting. They could develop civilization very quickly and improve productivity by themselves. When we see them again in a while, they might become a very scary race. And now this group of primitive humans in front of him seemed to have mastered higher level technologies that other races did not master at all. But in the issue of eating meat, their civilization had actually fallen into a bottleneck period of development. This small population, which was completely inconsistent with the level of civilization development, clearly explained all this. What Guo Sen had to do at this time was to make them learn to eat meat and learn to hunt. Is there a way? Guo Sen immediately began to look for who was the leader of this primitive human tribe. It was not difficult. He had seen before that in the center of this tribe, there was a house covering a large area. Although it was built of wood and stone, it was still beautiful. Some strange patterns were painted on it with plant juice. There was also a stone pillar at the door for decoration, which was better than other houses. However, why did he hear people screaming inside? Damn, what are the people inside doing? Guo Sen's sight entered this seemingly spacious house. As soon as he entered the door with a woven fabric, made of torn ropes, Guo Sen saw a group of female primitives and the leader doing something that could not be written. Oh, you are really motivated. Guo Sen really felt that in this primitive civilization, where there was no entertainment at all, there were really not many things to play with. After they were full and satisfied, they probably had nothing else to do. Giving birth to monkeys was the only way to have fun. However, did they really think that the current productivity could really feed so many people? Another strange thing was that this leader seemed to be quite strong, with muscles all over his body, and not as fat as other primitive people. The same was true of the female primitives who fought with him. Their bodies were good. Guo Sen observed for a while and then withdrew. Oh my god. I didn't expect that these primitive humans had already unlocked quite a lot of skills. What old man, what sitting, what missionary, etc. He dared to say that in this regard, primitive humans were far ahead of other races. But it was really useless. Postures can't be eaten as food. Guo Sen originally wanted to find out from the leader whether they didn't eat meat from the beginning, but it seemed that he had to wait until they were done. His sight turned to other decorations in the house. The primitive humans seemed to like the shells of the huge fruits that could be made into pots very much. Even the room of this leader was full of such things. They not only used it as cooking utensils, but also used it for storage and decoration. There were really many uses, especially in this room. They were all painted with colors. Guo Sen thought that they should be the colors of some plants and fruits, and they all fell off with a slight rub. After a long while, the leader was still working hard. Guo Sen also lost interest and began to look at what was in the fruit shells out of boredom. Purple red tubers of plants, powdered vegetable leaves, wrinkled fruits, and dried meat that looked pretty good. They were all things that looked unappetizing. Wait. Dried meat. Guo Sen thought he was seeing things. He focused his eyes on the pile of dry and hard things. The fibers and texture on their surfaces, as well as the unique aroma of meat that seemed to be faintly wafting out, all proved without a doubt that they were dried meat. Guo Sen carefully examined other fruit shells and found more dried meat. Could this mean? He looked at the leader who seemed to never get tired of driving piles and suddenly had a guess in his mind. However, there was no evidence yet. What if the dried meat was used for something else? For example, to feed other small animals, or to feed that shell-less turtle? After a while, the leader finally got off the ground. After he finished his high, he walked to the place where the dried meat was stored. He took out the dried meat from the shell with a smile, put it to his mouth and ate it. He took out some more and distributed it to the hands of the female primitive people kneeling on the ground. Haha. You are really interesting. Guo Sen's guess has once again become a real fact. The so-called leader of this tribe seems to have a really bad heart. He eats meat himself, gives meat to these women, and lets other subjects eat vegetable paste. I guess he was just pretending to eat vegetables in front of everyone before. These women in the tribe probably came here for the meat and the prestige of the leader. As long as they are not stupid, the people in this primitive tribe should know that meat is much more delicious than those tasteless vegetable pastes. The case is solved. Really, do you want to monopolize the dried meat and become a ginseng winner for life? Can't everyone have fun together? Guo Sen couldn't help but smile bitterly. This leader probably ordered that all people in the tribe were not allowed to eat meat. Hunting was strictly prohibited, and he invented the way of eating vegetable paste. The purpose, of course, is for his happiness. But then again, he could obviously use his power as a leader to achieve this goal. Could there be another reason? Guo Sen stared at the leader carefully and suddenly felt that he seemed a little different. Unlike ordinary primitive people, this leader's body was covered with green or orange juice, and he also wore a headdress woven from feathers on his head, which looked a little funny. Guo Sen looked at everything in the house carefully, and then looked at the decorations on the outer wall of the house, as well as the strange stone pillars. He had some doubts about the identity of this leader. Could it be that he was not a leader, but a priest? Chapter 58. Sprinkle some salt, seeking recommendation votes. If the ginseng winner in front of him was not the leader but a priest, then all the problems would be solved. It would also explain the strange decorations inside and outside the house, the special paintings on his body, and the strange feather headdress. As the smartest person in a tribe, the priest definitely does not have as much power as the leader of the tribe. After all, he is just an auxiliary role that exists as a ruling tool for the leader. He may be able to work less and eat more, but he will never be favored by many women. After all, there is still the leader. As a subordinate, he can only dream. Guo Sen has a hypothesis. If this priest suddenly said one day that eating meat is likely to lead to the demise of the tribe, and it happened that many people died inexplicably, the ignorant primitive people of the tribe would panic and begin to believe his nonsense. In order not to die, they can only eat vegetable and fruit paste. He would also pretend to be a ghost to continue to consolidate his statement so that the people in the tribe would believe it without a doubt. Maybe there is really something in the fruits and vegetables that contains vitamins, starch, protein, etc. that makes everyone's body fatter and better, and the people in the tribe will not want to eat meat even more. No one hunts or anything like that, but farming is well developed, and everyone eats vegetable and fruit paste. Isn't it wonderful? But there are always people who dream of something like meat. After all, they are primitive people, and cannot effectively control their expectations. The priests will take advantage of this, secretly hunt some animals, secretly make them into dried meat, and then use them to seduce those female primitives. Of course, he can tell the outside world that the reason why there are strange sounds in the room is to pray that the crops in the fields can grow more vigorously. And for the sake of dried meat, the female primitives will keep such a secret and never tell it. This is a so-called closed loop. If this person is really a priest, Guo Sen will shift his sights and look for it again in the tribe. As a result, he found that in the direction closest to the inside of the tribe, there is indeed a building that is smaller than the big house in the center of the tribe. This building is built more magnificently than that one, and there are 2 guards holding stone guns standing at the door. Guo Sen saw that in the middle of the room, there was a fat man lying in a haystack chewing vegetable and fruit paste, talking to a primitive man kneeling on the ground next to him. Could it be that this is a leader? Guo Sen's mind moved, and their voices followed. Leader, our number is increasing, but there is not enough food. The fruits and vegetables in those fields can no longer meet our needs. The kneeling man said to the fat man. Guo Sen nodded in his heart. Sure enough, this fat man is a leader. So, is that a priest? Open up more fields and plant more food. That's the right way. The leader drank the vegetable and fruit paste with a satisfied look on his face, and didn't seem to think it was a big deal. Forgive me for being blunt, we shouldn't start hunting again, and give the already too many prey to. Didn't the witch doctor show us how terrible the consequences would be if we went to eat meat? Have you forgotten? The leader suddenly threw the bowl in his hand to the ground and smashed it to pieces. The subordinate lowered his head and didn't speak. The meat contains horrible bugs and miasma that can kill us. Have you forgotten that more than a dozen of our subordinates died after we ate the meat? I understand. I will never mention eating meat again. Please calm down, leader. Find more people and bring tools to open up a few more fields. The leader waved his fat hand, and the subordinate frowned and turned around and ran out, as if to convey the mission. Guo Sen also understood that the man he saw before was not a priest, but a witch doctor, and this human tribe, as he guessed, had indeed had a food poisoning incident. The horrible bugs mentioned by the leader are probably parasites hidden in animal meat, and the death miasma is probably the corrupt bacteria and viruses contained in spoiled meat. It seems that these humans did not process the meat with fire, like cooking when they ate it. Speaking of which, the witch doctor's jerky looked like something that had been cooked or roasted. The witch doctor has higher wisdom than everyone else in the tribe, and he uses this wisdom to play around with other primitive people. Now that I see it this way, it is really the same as I thought. The reason why these primitive people don't eat meat is not that they don't want to eat it, but they dare not eat it. They are afraid that after eating it, they will get sick and die directly, as the witch doctor said. As for the women who were with the witch doctor, they probably became the witch doctor's playthings willingly after eating meat that would not make them sick and tasted better than before. The matter has been understood almost, and Guo Sen also fell into deep thought. It may not be so easy to make the primitive people who have refused to eat meat for many years accept it again. If you force it, it may have a counter effect. Kill the witch doctor directly? That may not solve the fundamental problem. Control the leader and let him call on everyone to eat together? This is not possible either. What if the witch doctor jumps out to hinder? Plus the rebellious psychology of the primitive people. Maybe this fat man will be pushed down. So, what should be done? Guo Sen suddenly remembered a sentence. To conquer a person, you must first conquer his stomach. The reason why they don't accept meat is that the meat they ate before was raw or even smelly, and they had stomach upset or even died after eating it. Guo Sen didn't think that simply grilling or boiling meat would make them accept it again. After all, Guo Sen didn't think the taste was very good. The bloody smell was very strong, and there was no salty taste at all. In terms of Guo Sen's pursuit of meat, this was a very failed food. What if delicious meat was made to make the primitive people so greedy that they had to eat it? But if you want to make delicious food, you need a lot of things. This tribe didn't have the oil, salt, sauce, vinegar, chili peppers and other seasonings on the other side of the earth, nor did it have more cooking tools. Guo Sen couldn't do much. However, just a simple salty taste can also cook the ultimate deliciousness. Salt is easy to say. Guo Sen moved his mind and explored all the strata and caves within hundreds of kilometers nearby. Fortunately, a large amount of rock salt was stored in a shallow cave not far from this tribe. There were plenty of animals and salt near the tribe, so the rest of the work seemed to be easy. However, Guo Sen still felt that it was necessary to add a spoonful of salt to the peaceful life of these primitive people. Chapter 59. Just be reckless. Guo Sen quickly patrolled this vast continent. He searched the forests, grasslands, mountains, and river and lake shores almost inch by inch. Soon, he found his target, a primitive tribe not too far away from the previous tribe, only about a few dozen kilometers. He just took a rough look and understood one thing: the primitive humans here seemed to have developed civilization much healthier. With their backs against a huge cave, the primitive people tied strong and tall wooden stakes together with ropes and formed a rather large semicircular arc around the cave. The shape of this tribe is a bit like the style of the White Wolf tribe, but it is much larger than their tribe, and even the cave is the same, not only wide, but also unusually deep. At the fence opposite the cave, there is a 2-meter wide and high gate, and several primitive people are guarding it with weapons shining with metallic light. The metal is not copper, nor is it the color of iron. Looking further into the tribe, in addition to the cave, there are hundreds of houses built around the fence, similar to the previous tribe, made of wood and stone. The roof of the house is covered with something like fur, which seems much stronger and sturdier. A large number of primitive people are constantly moving between the buildings and the inside of the cave. Guo Sen observed carefully. There seem to be nearly 1,000 primitive people here, and their bodies can really be considered robust, much stronger than the previous tribe. And most of them are working non-stop at this moment. In the tribe, there is a square for drying animal skins, a pottery blast furnace for firing clay into pots or bowls and various utensils, a work area dedicated to weaving ropes with hay, and dozens of smelting rooms, where people wield sledgehammers to take red metal blocks out of the blast furnace for hammering. The primitive people inside were either peeling animal skins with metal blades, or kneading various containers with clay, or sweating profusely to make various metal tools and weapons, or even drying meat or roasting meat. The tribe was full of ping pong noises, as if telling Guo Sen about the prosperity here. Guo Sen expanded his sight and saw that nearly 100 primitive people were carrying weapons and carrying a lot of prey and walking towards the tribe in a mighty manner. Guo Sen noticed that these primitive people not only carried metal spears, but also metal swords. Farther away from the tribe, there were also female primitive people who kept collecting fruits on the ground or on trees. Guo Sen couldn't help but sigh. This is a healthy development of the civilization of a primitive tribe. Whether it is using fire, burning pottery, weaving or smelting, or even the technology of making metal swords that he had never seen before, it made Guo Sen understand that these primitive humans seemed to be more suitable to be the rulers of this continent than the guys who only knew how to grow crops and eat fruit and vegetable paste. He originally wanted to find a tribe composed of primitive humans or other humanoids, but he didn't expect to be lucky enough to encounter such a civilized tribe. However, this tribe also has its shortcomings. Guo Sen went around and didn't find that they had the technology to tame wild beasts and farm. It seems that compared with those vegetarian primitive people, these people prefer to hunt and gather food from unknown places. This also has a disadvantage, that is, if they want to continue to develop the tribe, they will spend more and more time hunting and gathering, and the prey and fruits will become less and less. One day, the prey and fruits nearby will become increasingly scarce, and if the population's appetite cannot be satisfied, the tribe will face 3 choices. Either passively reduce the population, or migrate to an area with more abundant food, or go to war with the tribe with abundant food. Guo Sen checked the warehouse where the weapons were stored in this tribe and found that they were almost piled up like a hill. This number is even more than the number of people in their tribe, and it is definitely not something used for hunting. In another corner of the tribe, hundreds of primitive people with green paint on their faces were holding spears and practicing something. They formed a square formation and kept making deafening roars. It seems that the primitive people of this tribe have really encountered a bottleneck period, and they should be ready to choose the third way. So, if this is really the case, who will be the opponent? The answer seems to be self-evident. So, the idea of this tribe is exactly the same as what I think. Guo Sen wanted to sprinkle salt on that tribe, that is, to conquer them with a powerful tribe like this. Only by conquering can the stronger race in front of him gain more power and continue to survive. Guo Sen saw that in the center of the tribe, a primitive man with an extremely strong body and a thin bone on his messy hair looked extremely conspicuous. In front of him, there were more than a dozen people half kneeling. Guo Sen looked at it this way and felt that they seemed to be talking about something. He used his ability. Chief, we all feel that we are almost ready now, and we request to go on the expedition. Guo Sen soon heard such a sentence, which was not surprising to him. Going on the expedition. Wait, how was the reconnaissance this time? The man called the chief was the strongest primitive man Guo Sen had seen. At this moment, he was already sitting on a wooden stake, and the expression on his face seemed to indicate that he was also looking forward to this sentence. Chief, since we met them in the depths of the forest last time, we also left people to follow them to a place with a pungent smell. That is their tribe. The subordinates answered immediately. Oh, pungent smell. Wait, is their tribe far away? How many people are there? Chief, if we start the action tomorrow morning, we can reach their tribe when Tanta rises to the highest point. As for the number of people, we haven't counted them completely, about 400 people. Tanta? Guo Sen looked at the red star hanging high in the sky. It was the first time he heard the name given to it by the intelligent life on the sphere. But this name is really hard to understand. If the whole world calls that star Tanta in the future, it doesn't sound very good. But what kind of easy to understand name is better? It can't be called the sun, right? 400 people. Then it seems that we have to gather all the warriors of the entire tribe and prepare them. The leader didn't seem to care about such a number. He was obviously more concerned about other aspects. What about their weapons? Chief, there are very few, and they are all stone spears. Stone. The leader smiled, and there was a contemptuous expression on his bearded face. They have technology that we don't have, and the food reserves are quite large. What's more, they have things that we can't understand. Let's go out tomorrow. The leader waved his hand and made a decision immediately without asking what the technology was or what the things that he couldn't understand were. Guo Sen could see that the leader had been overwhelmed by the words the food reserves are also quite large. What's more, the opponent's weapons are not many, and they are all stone spears. There is no need to consider anything else. Just do it and it's done. Chapter 60. Going in the opposite direction. Guo Sen's original intention was to find a tribe, to attack the farming tribe he saw at the beginning, to act as a conqueror, and to force the spread of more advanced technologies, while defeating and gathering them, including eating meat. In the history of the earth, when the advanced countries discovered the African and American continents during the Age of Exploration, as conquerors, they almost slaughtered all the local indigenous people, plundered various resources such as gold and spices, and even turned the indigenous people of the primitive tribes into slaves. But at the same time, more advanced culture and technology were also spread, causing prosperity there, and allowing civilization to move forward. Through war, the goal of conquest can be achieved quickly, and civilization can also be almost forced to integrate, even if the process is full of blood and slavery. This kind of conquest is much easier than Guo Sen teaching the farming tribe to eat meat alone, or letting the tribe in front of him start farming. At this moment, he also wants to know what he should do. If you want to do it, you have to do it more decisively. On his sphere, there will not be too weak intelligent life. Even without his intervention, the weak will eventually be eliminated. For example, now, this primitive tribe, even without his intervention, has already had the idea of conquering the farming tribe. This is an inevitable trend. Leader. A leader. The subordinates stood up and roared loudly. Hey, hey, hey. All the primitive people in the tribe raised their arms and roared. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Time passed quickly, and the next day came quickly. when the stars just rose in this huge primitive tribe. Everyone had woken up and immediately entered a state of preparation for war. After they gathered for a short time, the leader summoned all the combatants in the tribe and immediately distributed weapons. Guo Sen counted. This is a large army of nearly 500 people, which is almost a large scale in this backward era. 500 primitive people wearing thick animal skins gathered on the grassland outside the tribe and stood neatly in a square array. The warriors in the outermost circle all held metal spears nearly 2 meters long, while those in the inner circle all held metal swords suitable for close combat. If they went out to fight in this formation, Guo Sen felt that, even if the population of the farming tribe was 10 times more, they would probably be slaughtered. The difference in civilization was too great. It was simply crushing. Guo Sen saw that each of them was carrying some dried meat on their backs. Judging from the amount, it seemed that they were going camping, not too much, and they seemed to be extremely confident in their own abilities. They completely despised each other, and they had the qualifications. Guo Sen suddenly had an idea. Could he make things develop in the direction he wanted without relying on the presence of God or other abilities that had already been used? In short, it was to control the primitive man who was the leader and instill his own ideas into him, just to conquer and enslave, not to kill them all. What he needed was to make the technologies of the two tribes complement each other and form a more complete, scientific, and sustainable civilization. In that way, at least he would save a lot of effort to guide them, and they could just learn from each other. Guo Sen used his ability, but this was the first time he used a completely unknown ability. Can he control their thoughts? The leader stood at the front of the team. Just when he was about to make the final mobilization, he suddenly found that no matter what he wanted to do or say, he couldn't do it. His consciousness gradually became chaotic. After Guo Sen used his ability, he saw that the leader had raised his arms high, as if he wanted to make a pre-war mobilization, but suddenly stopped moving completely at the moment of using his mind. Did it work? Guo Sen tried to instill his consciousness. Say when in doubt, use quantum mechanics. The leader didn't move. What the hell? What happened? Failed. Is the sentence too difficult? Guo Sen instilled again. Or say the weather is good today, it's sunny and windy. The leader still didn't move. The soldiers in the square saw that the leader suddenly didn't say a word, and they thought he was angry, and everyone didn't dare to make a sound. Guo Sen tried a few other oranges and failed. Suddenly, he felt that his ability might not be omnipotent, and might not be able to control the leader's thinking. This was similar to the ability of God's presence. Both were to control an individual. The only difference was that one was to completely control, and the other was to instill the subconscious. Unexpectedly, it failed. Alas, can we only force God's presence in? Guo Sen felt that it was almost the same as guiding it himself. It was too much effort. It would be better not to do it. It was easier to pretend to be a ghost and there were no sequelae. I guess God's presence will only be used to experience things that you can't do as a will, or when you want to try something. He stopped using his ability and prepared to think of other ways. At this time, when in doubt, quantum mechanics. The leader said this in a deep and high voice. Damn. What's going on? Guo Sen thought he had heard something wrong. He was as confused as all the primitive warriors. What's going on with this leader? Why did he suddenly say this? Isn't this what I wanted to say just now? It's a nice day today, with a nice breeze and a sunny day. The leader seemed surprised that he could say such a sentence, and he looked at everyone with horror. Why did I say this? Wait, what I want to say is, try it, and the bicycle will become a motorcycle. Guo Sen said in his heart. It turns out that there is a delay ability. What he wanted the leader to say before, after the ability was lifted, it was said. It seems that this ability cannot be used at will. If you want to use it, you must think about how to use it in advance. After the leader said, sir, the times have changed, and I'm not a human being anymore, he fell into complete confusion. Of course, his subordinates were the same. Who would have thought that the leader said a bunch of messed up words that were completely meaningless? The crowd began to murmur and grumble, and everyone thought that the leader might be sick. A disease in the head or something. After all, the leader is not young anymore. Maybe After the group of people were in chaos for a while, the leader was temporarily freed from self-doubt. Now the primitive army has more important things to do. Everyone listen. We must completely conquer that tribe. Take their food. The leader gave an order, and all the warriors in the square raised their weapons above their heads. Hey, hey, hey. After the deafening shout, led by the leader, the square gradually changed into 4 O's, began to move along the grassland under their feet, and went into the forest. Guo Sen looked at the direction they were heading. Damn, where are you going? According to the direction, the farming tribe is in the south. Why are you going to the north? What's going on? We have to control them to go south quickly. There is no such tribe in the north. Thank you for your support. I have been revising the text recently, but now it seems that it is really worthwhile. However, because of this, the original drafts are almost gone. After all, my revision is starting from scratch. For example, the story of the dwarves has gone through 3 or 4 versions from the beginning to now, and it was finally changed to that version. The original version of the sheep people didn't even have 500 words. Can you believe it? While typing, I will also carefully read everyone's original ideas and comments, and draw inspiration from them, so I hope everyone can leave more comments. Maybe one of your ideas will be realized by me. There is another update today, because the book friend, required textbook, gave a reward of 10,000, so I must add another update. I really don't have any manuscripts saved. I'm typing now. I will try to code it out as soon as possible. Chapter 61 Misunderstanding. Additional update. Guo Sen suddenly felt something strange. The direction of this group of primitive troops was obviously the opposite. The location of the farming tribe was in another direction. No matter how they turned, they should not go to the north. Could it be that they were not going to the farming tribe, but to other places? The army marched forward in a mighty manner. The primitive people holding metal spears kept sweeping the ground, as if they were clearing the way for the people behind them. The primitive people holding long swords kept cutting the messy branches blocking the road in the forest. The two sides cooperated to clear a relatively easy path in the forest. Guo Sen took his eyes off them, and began to look for the target in the direction these people were moving. Not long after, he found a tribe built on the bank of a large river in the valley less than 15 kilometers away. This place was small and inconspicuous. It seemed that he had directly passed by it when he was looking for intelligent life before. However, after careful observation, he found that the people living in the tribe did not seem to have the same appearance and form as those primitive people. They were actually lizard people. These lizardmen looked different from the stupid guys Guo Sen had seen before. The color of their scales was not light green, but a more strange purple red. They were also relatively short, and even their tails were shorter. Their eyes were dim, and it was hard to see the color of their pupils. They were relatively small and flexible, and they seemed to be more like the lizardmen they had seen before, and they had not yet evolved. Guo Sen also noticed that the population of this tribe did not seem to be too large, only about 300 or 400 people. The weapons in their hands were undoubtedly stone spears that were made by grinding stones into sharp shapes. Their destructive power was very limited, and they were completely unqualified to fight against those primitive people. But then again, the metal weapons in the hands of the primitive people did not seem to be red copper, nor did they look like the iron weapons of the dwarf tribe. As for what they were, Guo Sen could not tell. Maybe it was an alloy of some metal? Guo Sen suddenly made a bold guess. This was not impossible. With so many intelligent creatures, there were more than one or two that surprised him, or even frightened him. Even if there were races with higher level smelting technology, it would not be surprising. Guo Sen looked at the lizardmen holding stone spears, and suddenly felt that, even if the primitive tribe sent 100 people to run over, they would probably be able to wipe out the lizardman tribe. The difference in weapons can multiply the advantage many times. What's more, the primitive people have higher combat literacy and even know how to use formations. Guo Sen stared at these guys with purple-red scales carefully, and saw that they seemed to have no expectation that someone would come to attack them. They were still doing what they had to do, and the scene was peaceful. The warehouse where the dried meat was stored was almost full and there was no room for it. The stone spears were also placed in the warehouse in an orderly manner. They seemed to have no worries about food, clothing and daily necessities. The lizardmen seemed to be living well. He noticed that, although they could not use fire and had no advanced weapons, these lizardmen seemed to have realized a different civilization route. They were actually bathing in a bunch of pools not far from the river. Those pools were steaming hot, and a bunch of lizardmen were enjoying themselves in them, and seemed to like this behavior very much. However, why was the pool steaming? Guo Sen carefully observed the surrounding environment, and suddenly he found that this so-called river valley was actually the location between two dormant volcanoes. The big river cut the connection between the two volcanoes, and after who knows how many years, it became the current river valley. The geothermal heat of the volcano heated the pool water, and the amount of water seemed to be quite large. After it was connected, it even connected to the big river flowing next to it, forming a strange tributary. Guo Sen noticed that most of the lizards in the tribe began to come to the pool in groups of 2 or 3, eating dried meat while taking a bath, looking very comfortable. Guo Sen looked at all this and really didn't know where to complain. It was a misunderstanding. It turned out that the technology we don't have, that the subordinate had said to the primitive leader, was not farming as Guo Sen thought, but hot springs. For Guo Sen, the intelligent creatures living on the sphere, although extremely backward and even looked like crooked melons and cracked dates, they could always bring him some surprises. The lizard people on this land opened Guo Sen's eyes again. They have low productivity, a small population, and can't even use fire. Now they have learned to enjoy life, and are leisurely soaking in hot springs. Compared with the lizard people on another continent, they have obviously developed some prototypes of the leisure and entertainment branch of civilization. Although this does not conform to the normal law of civilization development. How about studying fire and weapons when you have time? Or learn from another primitive tribe and start farming and planting? Guo Sen suddenly felt that, if he wanted to make the civilization of the lizard people in this tribe go one step further, it seemed that he could only trouble the conquerors who were very developed in all aspects. He didn't want to teach them all the civilizations again. At the beginning, Guo Sen really wanted to teach various basic civilizations to the tribes of various races on the sphere patiently, but after seeing so many tribes and civilizations in succession, he no longer had the original idea. If there are more advanced civilizations at the same time, Guo Sen would like them to conquer the backward civilization. This is also a kind of survival of the fittest, a natural law. Even if you don't intervene, the final result will be the same. What's more, they are so close to each other. A more advanced civilization can make the backward civilization understand whether hot springs or metal smelting are more important. 500 warriors holding metal weapons against 300 or 400 lizardmen who like to take a bath. The result is obvious. Guo Sen actually didn't want to see this completely one-sided battle, and there would definitely be no fierce battle between them. Metal weapons versus stone weapons. 500 muscular warriors versus the lazy and skinny lizardmen who like to take a bath. The result is self-evident. However, Guo Sen still has a strong interest in how primitive people fight. When he was in the White Wolf tribe before, he once boarded his spirit body in a dead body and experienced a wild battle. At that time, it was a few against many, and almost all single-handed, and some wisdom we used to win, instead of the current crushing battle with both numbers and more advanced weapons. How these primitive people will fight, and how the lizardmen will resist, Guo Sen really wants to observe carefully. Of course, this time he is not going to come, nor does he want to board in a dead body. This book group, 1,092,371,091. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Fatal. Guo Sen shifted his sights from the lizard tribe and found the primitive people walking in the forest again. However, he unexpectedly found that the primitive people encountered a strong enemy in a place with sparse trees. It was a ferocious beast that was definitely not easy to mess with just by looking at its appearance. They were nearly 2 meters long, with bright golden fur and some lightning-like red stripes on them. Their heads were very huge, with fierce red pupils staring at the front, and the two sword-like fangs in their mouths were half a meter long, which looked extremely terrifying. The claws were like blades and the tail was like steel braids. It looked like a leopard, but not a leopard, and like a tiger, but not a tiger. Sharp teeth and claws, beasts. Guo Sen counted them, a total of 17. They looked so scary, but they were still animals that moved in groups. They surrounded the nearly 500 primitive people and did not immediately attack them, confronting them. If it were an ordinary person, he would definitely start to urinate when he saw this situation, and it is not impossible that he would also poop. But what surprised Guo Sen was that the primitive people held weapons, stared at the attackers, and their expressions seemed calm. It was impossible to find even a trace of fear in them. Awesome guys, you are not afraid. If modern people on Earth saw a large group of tigers and lions running out of the cage and surrounding them in the zoo, their throats would be broken, their legs would be weak, their clothes would be wet, and their pants would be dirty. All the primitive people had been arranged in a square formation, just like what Guo Sen had seen in the tribe before, with long spears pointing outward, neat and unusual. Everyone had a firm and resolute look on their faces, and seemed to be used to such things. The hands holding the weapons did not even tremble. This group of tigers and leopards seemed to be waiting for some opportunity, and began to circle the primitive people continuously. Although the steps were slow, each step was heavy, and the agile muscles were tense, as if they could explode. They will leap, pounce, bite, tear, and bathe in blood. Dozens of minutes passed quickly. This fight tested patience and strategy. The air heated by the hot rays of the stars made the faces of the primitive people covered with sweat. Their breath was heavy, their legs were like rocks, and in the suddenly silent jungle, not even a bird could be heard. As time passed, the tigers and leopards seemed to lose their patience. Their leisurely pace before gradually lost its rules. The constant hunger in their stomachs urged them to attack. Woo-ga-ga-ga. The roars of the 17 tigers and leopards resounded throughout the jungle. At the same time, the primitive warriors were ready, pointing the tips of their spears outward, and the muscles on their hands holding the spear handles were also tensed to the limit. Woo-ga-ga-ga. The tigers and leopards rushed out from all directions in an instant. As fast as the wind, as swift as lightning. Like golden thunder, their figures flashed in the air in an instant. And in the next second, the claws like sharp blades opened and cut through the air. The huge mouth with extremely terrifying fangs opened to the limit. Attack. The leader standing in the center also roared at the same time. Kill. The spear tips pointed straight ahead and diagonally upwards. This almost invincible defensive formation protected the entire primitive people, just like a hedgehog. The spear tips soon came into contact with the beasts that pounced on them. Gah! The sharp metal cut through the fur, skin and thick fat of the beasts. The claws and fangs cut through the flesh and cut through the bones. Blood splashed into the air at the same time as the screams. Kill! Kill! The primitive people roared, gathering all their strength on their weapons. At this moment, blood mist filled the air. The roars of the beasts and the screams and shouts of the primitive people, the sound of weapons and flesh colliding, turned the originally quiet forest into a fierce battlefield. Tigers and leopards were constantly stabbed by the spear tips, and fell to the ground and twitched. They could not break through the spear formation, nor could they get close to the primitive people, and suffered heavy casualties. On the primitive side, there were only 2 or 3 injured, and they were almost unaffected. They have been maintaining their formation. Even if one corner of the defense line is breached, the people next to them will immediately come forward and be indestructible. Attack. Use swords. The leader roared, and raised 2 swords, rushing towards a tiger leopard beast that was pierced through the front and back of a spear. With his hands waving, a beast head fell to the ground instantly. The heroic deeds of the brave leader also made the other primitive people more excited. Attack. Amidst the huge and uniform roars, the warriors raised their swords and killed all the tiger leopard beasts lying on the ground. The tiger leopard beasts that were lucky enough not to be injured even lost their fighting spirit completely. After seeing their companions being chopped down one by one, they hurriedly fled into the depths of the forest. The confrontation lasted an unusually long time, but the fighting time was very short. In less than a few minutes, the primitive people conquered the invading tiger leopard beasts with their strong defense and attack power. The primitive people panted heavily and did not dare to relax their hands holding their weapons. They stared at the surroundings, still maintaining their formation and tense nerves. The tiger leopard beasts might be pretending to escape, so they had no reason to relax. Years of experience living in the forest taught them that a small negligence would also lead to their annihilation. After a while, the tiger leopard beasts did not appear again, and the primitive people finally relaxed some nerves and began to clean up the battlefield. Lying on the ground were the bodies of 11 beasts that had completely lost their voices, while the primitive people only had one seriously injured and one slightly injured. This was undoubtedly a great victory. Hey, hey, hey. They shouted loudly and celebrated the victory. After watching the whole process, Guo Sen's biggest feeling was that this primitive tribe seemed to be several levels ahead of other tribes in terms of combat literacy. Of course, the sharp and hard weapons also shine brightly. After celebrating the victory, the primitive people began to carefully check the injuries of the two injured. However, to Guo Sen's surprise, the dying guy with a hole in his abdomen and intestines flowing out was thrown directly into the weeds by them. The lightly injured soldier whose leg had a piece of flesh cut off by the tiger leopard beast's claws was also treated in the same way. Guo Sen didn't understand it at first, but he soon understood why it was like this. In this humid and sultry primitive jungle, these tribes with low productivity could not have any advanced medical skills. A simple infection could be fatal. After a piece of flesh fell off his leg, even if he was not infected with bacteria, he would definitely be a useless person in the future. The huge tribe did not have any extra food, and if they had to support a person who had lost his labor force, it would be tantamount to asking for trouble. The primitive people surrounded the two men and raised their spears. With screams, two lives suddenly disappeared. A book group has been established. The group number is 1,092,371,091, and everyone is welcome to chat in the group. Chapter 63 Death in Peace. This was a correct decision. However, Guo Sen still admired those primitive people for being so decisive. In the vast primitive jungle, both the tribes of their own side and the enemy were extremely far away, not to mention that the tigers and leopards might still be waiting for a chance to take revenge. A wounded person would require at least two normal warriors to lose their combat effectiveness to take care of him. Even if they were lucky enough to return to their original tribe, there was almost no chance of survival. Tetanus infection, excessive blood loss, low resistance. These risks also reduced the survival rate of the wounded to an unimaginable level. In this primitive civilization, where medical awareness has not yet been established, being injured is equivalent to death. This is common sense. In the face of common sense, the existence of life is insignificant. This is also the natural law of survival of the fittest in the wild era. After the primitive people killed their wounded companions, they picked up the food on them and then gathered together again. Guo Sen saw that they didn't seem to have any sad expressions, and they began to stand in place holding their weapons and eating. The previous battle consumed a lot of their physical strength, so it is understandable that they need to replenish their energy, and even holding weapons to prevent the tiger leopard beasts from attacking can be accepted. But next to you is the companion you just killed. These people are really... Guo Sen felt that he could not make any comments. If he were to do it, he might not be able to do better. Tanta, that is, the star, has risen to the highest position of the day. The primitive people have also noticed this and seem to have to modify the original plan. If there were no attack by the tiger leopard beasts, they should have reached the outside of the lizardman's tribe by now. Chief, Tanta has reached the highest point. What should we do next? A warrior stood up and asked the question first, which was what everyone else wanted to know. Keep going. With our combat power, it won't take long to conquer the enemy's tribe. Can they be as powerful as the tiger leopard beasts? The leader's face was full of disdain and he seemed extremely confident. He also had the qualifications. After all, in the previous battle, the siege of more than 10 powerful tiger leopard beasts only injured 2 people in this primitive army. How can a backward race of just a few hundred people do anything to them? Ha ha ha. The chief is right. Those monsters, no matter how strong they are, Can't be stronger than tiger and leopard beasts. That's right. Kill them all. Yes. Leave no one alive. Don't kill them all. Try their women. Yes. Taste them. The primitive people's chaotic roars were like noise. Their faces were filled with playful expressions, and all kinds of vulgar words began to come out of their mouths, one after another. The leader raised his arms to the sky, signaling everyone to stop. Let's set off immediately after eating. After occupying that tribe, we can go back tomorrow. Of course, I won't stop you, no matter what you do. Remember, it's okay to be a little too extreme. His words were like adding fuel to the fire. The primitive warriors became more excited. Hey, hey, hey. They roared loudly and rearranged their formation. At this moment, they couldn't wait. Guo Sen watched all this coldly, feeling a little complicated. The so-called conqueror should be like this, right? They act for money, wealth, and everything unknown. Greed is their nature, and madness is their pronoun. In their eyes, they deserve everything, no matter what they get, by relying on their strong strength to conquer the weak. But in this extremely backward primitive civilization, if they don't do this, their own lives will be difficult to maintain and guarantee. Desire has changed everything. Guo Sen had a question about these extremely ignorant primitive people in front of him. When they occupied other tribes, did they have the consciousness to absorb the various skills and technologies of the other party? After conquering the lizard tribe, would they absorb the technology there? What about the farming tribe? Would they burn those fields? These seemed to have become false propositions. Could it be that after they occupied the nearby tribes, they would have to teach and guide all the technologies they didn't have again? This seemed to deviate from Guo Sen's original intention. He originally thought that through the war actions of these conquerors, the civilization on this continent could be integrated and leaped. Now it seems that it has simply become the military expansion of primitive people. However, it seems that there is no way at present. You can't just throw these primitive people into the sea to feed the ancient giant rockfish, and then guide the three tribes to learn technology at the same time, right? This is unrealistic. Guo Sen smiled bitterly in his heart. He decided not to think too much for the time being, and just watch how this legion will conquer the lizard people. Guo Sen found that it seemed that when exploring the forest, this primitive legion seemed to have a very powerful method. They even had scouts walking in the front, relying on the position of the stars and the growth of leaves and trunks to distinguish the direction, and from time to time they used long swords to mark the trunks and constantly modify the direction of advance. They have lived in the forest for a long time and are already familiar with such things. The middle section of the team is very bloated, and the length of the entire core is not stretched too much. This is also to prevent individual soldiers from falling into a situation of single soldier combat and being isolated and helpless when an accident occurs. There are not many people in the back section of the team, even the leader is among them. They are also more burly and have the strongest combat effectiveness. Even if something really happens, these people alone can quickly escape from the battlefield with their abilities. They seemed to have a unique understanding of marching and fighting, and they had taken all aspects into full consideration. Talent? Guo Sen thought so for the time being. However, in the distant future, how far they could use this talent would depend on themselves. As the team continued to march through the jungle, they occasionally encountered some ferocious looking beasts, but in front of their powerful attack and defense, those were nothing. They were not afraid of being besieged by more than 10 tigers and leopards, and 1 or 2 passing by was like giving away experience points. The primitive people were getting closer and closer to the lizardman's tribe, and they had reached the border of the forest. Going a little further, there were uneven hills with sparse low shrubs about 1 or 2 meters high. In front of the shrubs, there was a grassland that stretched to the valley. In this dense grassland, as long as these primitive people bent down, they could simply hide and would not be discovered by the lizardmen who were enjoying the hot springs. I guess they had used this for reconnaissance before. Then he looked at the lizardmen. They were really leisurely. It seemed that whenever he saw them, they were either taking a hot spring bath or on their way to take a hot spring bath. Do you think you are enjoying it? You are in big trouble. Guo Sen couldn't help but wonder how these lizards have survived for so long. Chapter 64. Stalemate. The lizardmen who have learned to enjoy themselves before they have a fully mature civilization have been evaluated the lowest in GUOSEN's eyes. They can't use fire, let alone smelting and pottery making, but they go to hot springs endlessly. Is it necessary for such a race to continue to exist? The answer is naturally no. Even though they have never been conquered and have never experienced disasters, they have survived to this day. But an overly lazy race cannot always be favored by luck. The footsteps of the primitive army did not stop. They had already entered the bushes and would reach their destination in a short time. At this time, 2 lizardmen who seemed to be on patrol happened to pass by nearby. They carried stone spears on their shoulders, and their expressions seemed to be very relaxed. There were still some water drops on their bodies, as if they had just finished a bath. After the primitive people collectively entered the bushes, they did not alarm the snakes, and hid in the leaves without saying a word. And the lizardmen did not seem to check the situation nearby, and walked back to the tribe carelessly. After they entered the tribe, they only chatted with a few people in the tribe for a few words, and then went to take a bath lazily. Alas, Guo was speechless, thinking that even if you look carefully, you can see the light skin of the primitive people that is completely out of place with the green bushes. If you can find it earlier, maybe you can get the upper hand in the upcoming battle. However, even if you get the upper hand, what? They certainly can't defeat the primitive army. Guo sighed in his heart. The people in this tribe of lizardmen with strange skin color will usher in their last day on this planet. This is the fate they will inevitably face. There is no chance of turning the tables. Guo watched the primitive people bend down, gradually get out of the bushes, and crawl into the half-meter high grass. They have a very strong tactical quality, and they didn't foolishly run out to attack directly. Even though their weapons are sharper, there are more people, and they have all the conditions to win, even if they rush up. There is no wind today, and the grassland is like a green and calm sea, which provides better conditions for their close combat. The speed of the primitive people was not slow. It didn't take them too long to reach the edge of the grassland. It was only a few dozen meters away from the lizardmen's tribe. Guo looked at the lizardmen sentinels and guards. They were still standing there stupidly like before. Although they were facing the outside and staring at the direction of the grassland, their vigilance was too low. From time to time, they would chat and didn't seem to take the guarding work seriously. As for the other lizardmen, they were just like before, taking a bath. This time, even everyone went to take a bath. Guo laughed. Go take a bath. The water in the pool will turn blood red in a while, and your bodies will float on the river. He felt that his thoughts now tended to gloat over other people's misfortunes, which did not seem to be the idea of a planetary will. But seeing the lizardmen like this, he got angry. The disaster was imminent, but they were still soul-lax. How far can they go? However, Guo seemed to have overlooked one point. The hearing of this group of lizardmen seemed to be very sharp. Just as the primitive people were about to crawl out of the grassland, they also felt unnatural movements and anticipated the arrival of danger. Prepare for battle. Prepare for battle. The 2 lizardmen sentinels abandoned their posts and hurriedly ran to the square in the tribe, shouting at all the lizardmen who were soaking in the hot springs. Enemy attack? Guo saw that after the burliest lizardman came out of the largest hot spring pool, he ran to the place where the weapons were placed at almost the fastest speed, holding 2 stone spears in both hands. Chief, there is. However, the primitive people began to roar loudly. Hey. Nearly 500 primitive people quickly rushed out of the bushes and appeared on the inside of the lizardman tribe like a divine soldier, blocking the only exit. The fence of the lizardman tribe was made of rubble and dilapidated wooden fences, but the height was quite scary. Unless you desperately escape from the exit, you can only be suffocated inside and wait for death. Everyone, get your weapons. Guo saw that the lizardman leader seemed extremely nervous, as if he had never expected the enemy to come. All the lizardmen in the tribe jumped out of the water almost at the same time and ran straight to the simple house where the weapons were stored. Guo was surprised to find that the primitive people did not attack directly. After entering the tribe, they directly formed a square shape, just like when they dealt with the tiger and leopard beasts before. Hey. Hey. The primitive people began to roar loudly. They knew that with their own abilities, this monster-like race was no match at all. This invincible formation that killed more than a dozen tiger and leopard beasts would be the nightmare of these monsters. At this moment, the faces of the primitive people were all cruel and playful smiles. They all knew that there was no reason for them to lose. It was almost certain that the tribe of this monster in front of them would become this. Guo Sen understood that the reason they did not attack immediately seemed to be that they wanted to use the terrifying pressure to crush the spirit of the lizardman. After that, they would use crazy slaughter to make them completely desperate. The civilization is an advanced one, but will this warlike and cruel character be a hidden danger in the future? Guo Sen cannot determine it now. This is all to be considered later. Let's first look at the war between the two tribes. However, after all, this may not be a war, just a one-sided massacre. The primitive people did not attack directly, which gave the lizard people plenty of time to prepare. After they hurriedly equipped their weapons, they stood in a rather messy formation. The largest and strongest ones were in front, and the weaker ones were in the back. The female lizard people and the little lizard people shrank into the houses. They did not seem to have a clear concept of formation like the primitive people. They said they were fighting, but they just stood there holding their weapons. The distance between them was very large, like a pile of loose sand. The gap was really too big. This is true in all aspects. I'm afraid that the moment this war started, it would also end, right? Now it depends on whether the lizard people can take the lead in responding to the enemy and add some fun to this boring battle whose victory has been decided in advance. However, things seem a little strange. After the roar, the primitive people did not choose to attack immediately, and the lizard people were the same. They all huddled and did not move, like a group of statues. The primitive people seemed to be showing off their strength, as if they wanted to use this to intimidate the other side. Guo Sen couldn't wait any longer. What's the point of stalemate? The victory was overwhelmingly inclined to the primitive people. Go ahead. What's there to hesitate? Don't care about the momentum, okay? However, the primitive people were still standing there motionless. I don't know what they were thinking. Guo Sen was speechless. Do you really want me to do it? He remembered how he controlled the leader before. After a while, charge. The leader's roar at this time was like a thunderclap, ringing in the ears of the primitive people. Charge. The primitive people had been waiting for this sentence for too long. They raised their weapons high and ran to the lizard people's tribe. The leader, who was standing still and waving his arms, was almost going crazy when he saw his subordinates rushing out. He wanted to wait for a while and continue to scare these monsters to show his strength and terror. But why did he shout the order to charge just now? However, the primitive warrior who was rushing in the front suddenly froze before the tip of his gun touched the lizard man, and then he fell to the ground with a bang, bleeding from all 7 orifices. I'm really sorry, I've been busy these 2 days, and I may update once a day for a few days. I'm really sorry to all the readers who have been following me. If you really want to read it, you can come to the group to see another version I wrote before, a total of 6 chapters. Group 1,092,371,091. Chapter 65 The Balance of Victory. The cruel grin on the faces of the primitive warriors who were at the front had not yet faded, but their hands suddenly loosened, and the heavy weapons fell to the ground. Then purple-black blood slowly flowed out from their eye sockets, nostrils, and earholes. As they fell to the ground, it splashed into the air, forming an irregular blood rain, and then violently hit the primitive warriors, forming strange blood flowers. More than 60 primitive warriors lost their lives almost instantly. Guo Sen didn't see what happened in this short moment. Stop, stop, retreat, retreat. The primitive people suddenly became chaotic. Their formation almost fell apart at the same time, and they even dropped a large number of weapons, frightened out of their wits by this horrible fact. Some were completely frightened and collapsed on the ground, and were quickly harvested by the stone spears raised by the ruthless lizardmen, and dozens of people lost their lives. The fear of the unknown destroyed their almost perfect performance before. If Guo Sen had not seen their battle with the tiger leopard beasts, he would even think that they were 2 completely different legions. The monsters have witchcraft. There is witchcraft. One of the guys who almost became a dead body just now repeated this sentence with a hoarse voice, causing more panic to the others. The battle situation was suddenly reversed and tilted back. The primitive people were so scared that they threw their swords and spears on the ground and ran back, screaming and pissing. In just a short period of time, the team lost nearly 100 people. What the 17 tiger leopard beasts with powerful weapons could not do, these seemingly rubbish lizardmen actually did. Guo Sen did not expect this situation at all. Why did those primitive people die on the ground? Why did they bleed from all 7 orifices? Did these lizardmen do something? Just now, he paid too much attention to the performance of the primitive people and ignored the lizardmen, so he could only infer what happened from the miserable state of those dead people. After all, after suffering this blow, the primitive warriors have shrunk near the gate and dare not approach the lizard people for the time being. Wait, bleeding from all 7 orifices? In Guo Sen's impression, if this happens, it is generally related to poison. What's more, the blood on the faces of the primitive people is really black. Could it be that these lizard people really use some poisonous weapons? Guo Sen carefully observed the equipment on the lizard people, especially those palms covered with scales. If there are poisonous weapons, they must still have them. However, Guo Sen checked back and forth 360 degrees and did not see similar weapons from any of the guys with scales on their bodies. Is the tip of the stone spear poisonous? Guo Sen looked there again, but there was nothing to see on these black stones. This is strange. It stands to reason that only these weapons would have traces of poison. Could it be that it was not poison that killed the primitive people? Then what was it? Guo Sen stared at the primitive people who were huddled together and retreated far away. After nearly 100 of their companions were inexplicably killed, no one dared to step forward. Strange? What's strange? There's nothing wrong with their weapons and clothes. Could it be that the lizardmen themselves? Then, Guo Sen had an idea. Dozens of primitive people who had already died stood up shakily, slowly picked up their weapons from the ground, and approached the lizardmen with blood on their faces. The lizardmen were obviously shocked when they saw this scene. What's wrong? Why can't they still survive? Impossible. No one can stop our ability. Stop arguing. Do it again. They chattered, and Guo Sen listened to them from the side and was extremely interested in the ability they were talking about. Ability? You sit and see. He controlled the corpses and continued to approach, his eyes fixed on the lizardmen. However, it didn't seem to show anything. The lizardmen suddenly nodded their heads. However, when they found that those who were originally dead were still approaching, their faces became panic again, and finally they simply retreated again and again. What was going on? Guo Sen's experiment failed, but he thought about it carefully again. Curiosity gradually overcame everything. It was really interesting that the lizardmen, who seemed to be backward, could use ability to make up for the lack of weapons and numbers. Their development seemed to be different from all the races seen before. Since dead people don't work, what about living people? There will always be death in this battle. Even if the lucky people who are selected will not bleed from all 7 orifices, they may also pierce their heads in the chaos. With this idea in mind, Guo Sen quickly picked out a dozen of the most crying primitive warriors. As soon as he moved his mind, a dozen primitive people who were huddled at the farthest distance immediately stopped all actions and became puppets in his hands. This is very much like a real-time strategy game. Guo Sen, who is in the perspective of God, is like a commander, controlling these cannon fodder units to gradually approach death. This time, it is not much different from the last time. After approaching the lizardmen, a dozen unlucky guys screamed and bled from all 7 orifices, causing Guo Sen to lose control of them instantly and completely turned into corpses. The Legion, which had just recovered a little, fell into panic again at this moment, and they even retreated outside the door. However, this time Guo Sen saw it clearly. The lizardmen only opened their mouths and exhaled, and it looked like they were nodding after completing it in a very short time. Spraying? You have bad breath, and you actually made people bleed from all 7 orifices to death. It seems necessary to teach them how to brush their teeth in the future. This is naturally Guo Sen's joke. He was surprised to find that some of the intelligent creatures on the sphere had evolved unimaginable abilities. The invisible gas exhaled was obviously a poison gas. It was a poison gas that could kill the enemy instantly. Guo Sen finally understood that it was precisely because of this ability that the lizardman tribe has been able to continue to this day. But then again, why do the lizardmen who look exactly the same as the ones on the previous land, except for the different body color, have the ability to carry poison in their bodies? Guo Sen still clearly remembers how the lizardmen on that continent hunted. If they had such a convenient ability, why would they bother to make copper weapons? What kind of environment can allow these purple red-skinned lizardmen to possess toxins? Could it be that Guo Sen turned his sights to those hot springs? He had not carefully examined the kind of soup that the lizardmen loved to soak in before, but now he suddenly found that it seemed to be constantly bubbling inside, producing a smell similar to rotten eggs and a more pungent smell. So that's it. Soaking the poison into the body and finally becoming a weapon. Guo Sen suddenly felt that this seemed a little unscientific, but there were some things that science seemed to be unable to explain. In addition to soaking in the hot spring, he couldn't think of why these lizardmen had poison in their breath. Chapter 66, Big Reversal. Guo Sen originally had no expectations for the lizardmen, not even a 1 in 100 million chance of victory. In his opinion, the primitive people with advanced weapons and excellent combat experience would create an overwhelming war. As a result, the lizardmen took the lead in the first round and hit the opponent unexpectedly. And their ability also surprised Guo Senator. Spraying poison gas, this almost unique and deadly weapon, became the killer of the lizardmen. The primitive people, who had no relevant intelligence at all, lost absolute control on the battlefield because of this hidden secret. The balance of victory gradually rose from the extreme tilt to a normal and equal state. As long as the lizardmen did not move, the primitive people would not die, and if the primitive people made a fool, the balance would tilt again, but this time it would tilt to the lizardman tribe. Guo Sen had felt that some things were strange before, whether it was the lizardmen patrolling at the beginning, or the sentinels who took the initiative to give up the gate without closing it, and the seemingly loose formation of the lizardmen, all seemed like a strategy. This strategy made the primitive people mistakenly believe that this was a very rubbish tribe, and the people in it were opponents not worth mentioning. This also deceived Guo Senator. The battle situation in front of him was the best evidence. Guo Sen was no longer very interested in the outcome of this war. He was more concerned about what kind of civilization these poisonous people could develop in the future. Why is this so? The primitive people could not defeat these lizardmen in any way, and there was not even a glimmer of hope, unless they had long-range attack weapons, bows, and arrows. However, the long spears, that relied too much on close range and medium and short range attacks, made them almost like sending themselves to death in front of lizardmen, who could spray poison gas. As long as the head was still clear, the leader of the tribe would definitely choose to retreat when seeing the current situation. If the Green Mountains are there, there will be no worries about firewood. However, there was one thing that made Guo Sen very strange. That is, the lizardmen who had sprayed poison gas before seemed to be very tired, panting again and again, and retreated to the back of the team one after another. The lizardmen warriors, who were so dependent and looked even thinner, became the front line. Guo Sen saw that these guys seemed useless. They had no strength and couldn't even hold the stone spears. From time to time, they turned their ugly heads to the big lizardmen with doubts in their eyes and shook their heads repeatedly. Their embarrassment was also seen clearly by the primitive people. Guo Sen was a little puzzled. Could it be that only those lizardmen with larger bodies could spray poison gas? Otherwise, what was so scary about them? As long as the poison gas was sprayed, the enemy would never dare to move forward. However, the development of the next thing was again unexpected. The primitive people seemed to be gradually relieved from the previous chaos. The lizardmen who did not continue to approach gave them enough breathing time, regroup and configure the formation. The previous powerful leader came back again. Under his loud shouting, all the primitive people rearranged the team as before. With weapons in their hands, they suddenly roared, "Attack! Kill! Revenge for our companions!" He was not controlling the leader's consciousness at the moment, but at this moment, he heard a voice that absolutely could not come from the leader's mouth. The sound of charging and killing instantly resounded through the sky. Many primitive people, holding their weapons, charged the lizardman tribe again. They are coming again. Wow. The lizardmen immediately cried out in grief, and even dropped their weapons on the ground, freezing in place. The grim smiles on the faces of the primitive people bloomed again. Kill. Their magic is gone. Don't leave any alive. The primitive leader roared with an ecstatic expression on his face. Guo Sen knew it, and he seemed to have discovered the strange behavior of the lizardmen. Whether it was the strong lizardmen who retreated to the back before, or the smaller lizardmen who were too timid, it all showed a fact. The poison gas of the lizardmen seemed to be only possessed by the big ones before, and the rest were just ordinary people. However, Guo Sen always felt that the behavior of these lizardmen was a bit strange. Even if there was no poison gas, they wouldn't be so scared, right? You just dealt a heavy blow to the enemy's morale, and killed nearly 100 people. The lizardmen standing in the front almost collapsed on the ground, their legs shaking uncontrollably. They had completely lost their will to fight. Haha. All of you die. What on earth is going on? The primitive people who rushed to the front, including the most crazy leader, suddenly felt something unusual when they were less than 2 meters away from the lizardmen. Their eyes were wide open, and extremely painful sounds squeezed out of their throats. Then, black and purple blood flowed from their eye sockets, nostrils, ears and mouths. No. The leader pinched his neck with both hands, his expression extremely distorted. However, his body could no longer withstand the invasion of the poison. Nearly 100 primitive people, together with their leader, became victims of the lizardman's evil plan. The rest of the primitive warriors who were lucky enough not to be poisoned had already found it impossible to leave this treacherous battlefield. The big lizards had already rushed out from the back, holding blunt stone spears, harvesting their lives. The primitive people, who were as powerful as tigers and leopards, became prey at this time, being slaughtered by the lizards they had never faced. Groups of life flames were extinguished with continuous screams. Run, run. Help, help. The dozens of primitive people who ran faster were extremely frightened. They just wanted to escape from this hell, but suddenly found that the door that was originally open had been completely closed by someone. Exclamation mark. No. Please, don't kill. However, all the lizards showed the same cruel smile as the primitive people when they first arrived here. Bathed in the splashing blood, the lizard leader raised his weapon high. Leave no one alive. Shoot. Hundreds of stone spears were thrown out from the hands of the lizardmen, drawing an arc. No. The pupils of the last primitive people reflected the dense and deadly spears like raindrops. The blood dyed this originally peaceful tribe red. The life fire of 500 powerful primitive people was completely extinguished here. And the lizardmen didn't even have a single injured person. This battle ended suddenly in Guo Sen's constant suspicion and surprise. Chapter 67 undoubtedly correct. The primitive tribe, with advanced weapons, extremely high tactical qualities, and strong strength, should be the winner of this war, no matter how you look at it. As the lizardmen, whose civilization is almost backward in all aspects, it stands to reason that there is no reason or chance for victory. The original ending should be that the primitive army completely conquered, slaughtered, and enslaved the lizard tribe. However, the lizards gave a counterattack to all those who underestimated them. From the beginning, the patrolmen pretended not to find the enemy. The sentries led the enemy into the tribe and used messy and uneven formations to confuse. This series of actions was to make the primitive people step into their trap, poison gas attack. However, before the first defensive counterattack was successful, they had already thought of the backup plan. In order to crush the enemy completely, they pretended to let the big lizardmen at the front retreat and push the seemingly weak little lizardmen to the front. The little lizardmen can be regarded as superb acting skills, successfully deceiving everyone. Even Guo Sen once thought that they had run out of tricks this time and had no chance to sing. But this is exactly the effect that this cunning tribe wants to achieve. There were so many little lizardmen that the poison gas they sprayed killed most of the primitive people. Then, in order to prevent deserters from appearing, they even closed the gate of the tribe without anyone noticing. Finally, there was Guo Sen's somewhat unexpected projection. The skill of using a stone spear as a bow and arrow is actually just a basic operation according to common sense. But since none of the intelligent life he had seen before had ever done this, Guo Sen didn't even think about it. After looking at the bodies of the primitive people who were stabbed like sea urchins, Guo Sen felt that it was time to reflect on his thoughts. From the moment he discovered intelligent life, he had always thought that an advanced civilization should defeat a backward civilization. Reason should defeat chaos, that's how it should be. When helping the White Wolf tribe defeat the Black Wolf tribe, Guo Sen thought that there was nothing wrong with what he did. Helping an advanced civilization defeat a backward civilization should be undoubtedly correct. Even if there are only 40 people left in the advanced civilization, there are still 400 or 500 people in the backward civilization. At that time, he thought that the White Wolf clan, which was rational, intelligent, and even had an unyielding will, was more worthy of living on his sphere than the barbaric Black Wolf clan. But now, after seeing the weak lizardmen repeatedly reverse the situation and annihilate the extremely powerful primitive people, he felt that the truth he had insisted on did not seem to be absolute. If he had stood by and let the Black Wolf clan destroy the White Wolf clan, would the Black Wolf clan establish a civilization similar to the White Wolf clan? Even in the distant future, would they establish a huge force and occupy the entire land? For the Black Wolf clan, which has strong fertility, ferocity, and a strong desire to survive, this probability seems very high. Looking at the White Wolf clan again, with only 40 people, when will they be able to truly revive the tribe? These things were things that Guo Sen had never thought of before. Is an advanced civilization necessarily correct? Will a backward civilization necessarily perish? Guo Sen felt that if he encountered civilizations similar to those between the White Wolf clan and the Black Wolf clan, or between the lizardmen and the primitives, he would not, as he did before, easily affect the continuation of a civilization based on his momentary subjective assumptions. No one, including him, could guarantee that a backward civilization would defeat an advanced civilization. There were too many uncertainties. The lizardmen in front of him were the best example. They were cunning and completely reversed the result of the primitive people's crushing massacre. Guo Sen was thinking, and he was also reflecting at the same time. During this time, the lizardmen had begun to clean up the battlefield. They pulled off the hides of the primitive people, picked up the metal spears and swords they dropped on the ground, and completely turned them into their own things. Even without the skills to make clothes or the craftsmanship to forge weapons, they got these. These should have been unobtainable. It only took a war. The bodies of the primitives were thrown into the river. The lizardmen did not seem to have the habit of eating the enemy, let alone the idea of insulting the enemy's corpses. In this respect, they seemed to be much better than those primitive people who wanted to have dirty thoughts about the lizardmen before coming here. After the lizardmen did all this, they jumped into the bubbling hot spring again to enjoy it. However, Guo Sen would not think that they were just enjoying it this time. How far will this cunning race with the unique ability to spray poison go in the future, and where will it go? Feeling these in his heart, Guo Sen pulled his eyes away again. He just remembered something. The demise of the primitive army seemed to affect one of his previous plans. Sprinkle a handful of salt on the fruit and vegetable paste lovers in the farming tribe. Originally, he wanted the advanced primitive people to conquer there, popularize the importance of meat, and then upgrade their civilization to a higher level. Now that the primitive army has been destroyed, this idea has lost its most fundamental driving force. So, what should we do? If it were himself before this little war, Guo Sen would definitely and absolutely think of another way to change the recipes of the fruit and vegetable paste lovers. However, at present, Guo Sen had no idea of doing so. Eating porridge might create a special civilization. Why must they all be the same, starting from the same starting line, and start a competition between civilizations? A uniform civilization is not what Guo Sen pursues, nor is it the result he ultimately wants. He only now realized that he seemed to have deviated from some of his original intentions. Each civilization has its own unique characteristics, strengths, and weaknesses. Even the races are completely different. Why must the standards be unified? Those who like to lick salt, those who like to farm and eat vegetarian food, those who like to soak in hot springs. Such different civilizations, under continuous development, may show him results in the future that may not be meaningless. Their respective racial talents will also completely distinguish each other in the continuous evolution of this civilization. Of course, letting them maintain the status quo does not mean letting them go. As long as they are creatures living on his sphere, Guo Sen will intervene to prevent them from being exterminated due to some mistakes. What if a war breaks out? It's better to let the fittest survive. After all, the winner is the king. Chapter 68 The Butterfly Effect. Guo Sen once again turned his attention to the primitive tribe, who had no idea that all 500 warriors, including the leader, had died in the battle. The hundreds of primitive people here were hunting, picking fruits, smelting, and making weapons as usual. There were only a few men left in the tribe, who looked a little old and weak, and women and children who had basically no fighting power. They were all women and children. The powerful tribe, that originally had a 500-man army, was instantly defeated because of a war against the lizardmen. The arrogant leader took out all the warriors in the tribe, but after this time, there was no one left, counting on the remaining people to revive the tribe unless the fruit and vegetable paste tribe and the lizardmen not far away have no ambitions. Otherwise, they will almost certainly be conquered. The original conquerors will become the conquered in the future. Is this a kind of irony? Guo Sen's original idea of using this group of conquerors to add some salt to the life of the fruit and vegetable porridge tribe fell through, but now he doesn't want to do it anymore. As a group of humans similar to Earthlings, they look really beautiful at first. One tribe can farm and domesticate, and the other has strong military capabilities and a large population. Originally, they should be almost the strongest civilization he has encountered since he discovered intelligent creatures. But now look at it this way. One eats fruit and vegetable porridge and believes in witch doctors, and the other has 500 elites and even the leader. They seem to have become the bottom civilization among all the tribes. The worst thing is that the three tribes are very close to each other. There will always be a day when they meet after a distance of more than 10 kilometers. The lizardman tribe was discovered before, wasn't it, because the primitive people went to scout? Guo Sen estimated that it would not be long before the three tribes would rub out the sparks of war again. Food shortages, population surges, and various desires caused by the mother fuse of war. What will war bring? The victors will seize more advanced technology, even slaves, and quickly improve productivity. Then, they will continue to expand the tribe and gradually prosper. The defeated who escaped by chance will flee and migrate, seeking a safer and more suitable place to take root. With a sparse population, they may go through a long process of reproduction and survival, and whether their population can still be retained and not extinct in this process depends on their luck. The strong may not be the winner, but the winner must be the strong. On this continent, the primitive tribe with a legion is the strong, but their disastrous defeat against the seemingly weak lizard people also made them weak in an instant. As the final winner and the strongest lizard people on this land, whether they will further expand their power in the future or even annex the two human races is still unknown. However, Guo Sen still has some regrets. He really wants a human tribe to gradually develop and make a strong mark in the history of future civilization. Although this is a bit biased and a bit unfair, but if the lizardmen eventually wiped out the two human races, he would consider moving some of them to other places and letting them start civilization again. Of course, if they were still destined to be wiped out by then, he would definitely not help them a second time. Guo Sen shifted his sights. In total, he had seen 5 pieces of land in a row, starting with the lizardmen and ending with the lizardmen. Guo Sen knew very well that, even if he was unlucky, he would encounter 1 or 2 tribes of intelligent creatures on the remaining 4 pieces of land. At the beginning, he thought that there was only one intelligent race, the lizardmen. However, when he saw the white wolf tribe, dwarves, sheep people, and even humans one after another, he suddenly realized that an unimaginable and prosperous civilization group was born on the sphere. This is much better than the Earth where only humans exist. However, Guo Sen would also think about it now. Are humans also the lucky ones who stand out from the many intelligent creatures? In the ancient times of the Earth, were there any races similar to the lizardmen? These are all unknown things. Thinking of the civilization group on his sphere, Guo Sen had some strange feelings again. Lizardmen, white wolf tribe, dwarves, sheepmen, humans. After these races that have been discovered so far are combined together, there seems to be something very strange. If they exist alone in the sphere, it is not a problem, but if they appear together, it is very unusual. Guo Sen thought carefully. Are they a little like the creatures in the other world in the novel? In the world of swords and magic, aren't there all kinds of humanoid creatures? Lizardmen, dwarves, these are all standard creatures in the other world. An inexplicable sense of doubt rose in Guo Sen's heart and continued to expand. Why did so many intelligent creatures like those in the other world appear on his sphere at once? Is his own planet a different world? No, it's not right. The humanoids that exist in the imaginary novels are much more real when they live on his sphere. They don't have any magic, and there are no demons or heroes here. At least not now. It stands to reason that the appearance of so many humanoids who entered the Stone Age almost at the same time is indeed a bit abnormal. It should be either earlier or later. Could it be that this was the result of his adjustment of the single-celled red and green creatures? The butterfly effect. Guo Sen thought of this word again. The various adjustments he made to the single-celled organisms transformed the living environment of many multi-celled organisms, which allowed the life on the sphere to have an unusually rich and colorful civilization. This is also a guess. During the unknown period of time, when he was sleeping, what exactly happened, and what kind of stimulation caused the creatures on the sphere to collectively evolve into human form? These are completely unknown things. Guo Sen took a long breath in his heart and decided not to think about such things for the time being. The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. It would be better to explore the 4 unknown continents as soon as possible. Finding the creatures they have is the most important thing Guo Sen should do. In addition to the 5 pieces of land, one of the unexplored pieces is the vast desert area that was originally the center of the origin continent. After it was completely transformed from a desert far away from the ocean to a land surrounded by the ocean a long time ago. What kind of changes will there be here? Guo Sen's sight directly found the almost oval-shaped flat land at the center of the equator. It has now completely become a sea of plants. Guo Sen is very satisfied with this. The blue-green forest that covers the sky and almost occupies the entire land has heard the calls of countless animals, birds and insects. It was once a desert for organisms, but now it has become a paradise for organisms. So, what kind of intelligent creatures are there here? He raised his sight, and just as he was about to start looking carefully, he suddenly found a building reflecting the light of the stars. Is that a pyramid? Exclamation mark. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Prayer. If Guo Sen was asked to choose 10 moments that surprised him, the pyramid in front of him could be one of them. In his impression, pyramids should not appear here and now, but should be on the earth, which is far away. But this almost standard pyramid is right in front of him. The layers of rocks that are constantly stacked up are decreasing in a trapezoidal shape, and at the highest point they become a sharp square corner. The light of the stars is reflected by the rocks, like a huge mirror. Guo Sen looked at this surreal building in confusion, and looked around carefully. He found that the pyramid was actually built on a small hill surrounded by jungle, and it was not as high as he imagined. From a close distance, the so-called layers of stones are actually more like layers of shale peeling off. However, the traces of man-made things are still very obvious. He found that many places seemed to have been peeled off and piled up. This pyramid does not seem to have been made by much labor. Rather than being piled up, it is more like a rough carving. After such an analysis, Guo Sen suddenly felt that it did not look like a pyramid. It was more like an illusion caused by a subconscious visual deception. This made Guo Sen, who was familiar with pyramids, mistakenly believe that this pyramid was a pyramid. However, what exactly was this semi-man-made object made of? The problem did not seem difficult to solve. Guo Sen soon found some clues at the bottom of this pyramid. It was a huge cave directly excavated on the hill at the bottom. The reason why it was not a natural cave was that it was too wide and huge, and there were quite a lot of artificial traces, just like the pyramids. There was a lot of noise coming from this cave from time to time. Guo Sen looked into this not so dark cave and instantly found an intelligent creature that made his eyes light up. When he saw the lizard man, he thought he was ugly at best, and when he saw the sheep man, he felt a little scary. But Guo Sen was puzzled by the appearance of the intelligent creature in front of him. But that's right, in front of him, the head with a black hard keratin beak and huge brown pupils in the black rimmed eye sockets was obviously a bird's head. A layer of short grey fine hair covered the entire body from the head to the upright posture. Where the wings should be, there were only sparse feathers, but human-like arms grew out of thin air. At the end of the arms, there were 5 slender and hard fingers covered with scales. And below the slender legs, there were also 5-fingered feet, which made him a little surprised. This was completely beyond his understanding of the bird species. Should they be called bad people? This is not an insult. There is really no language to describe this weird creature in front of him. Rather than evolving from birds, they are more like the product of the fusion of bird and human genes. However, thinking about how much brain capacity there is in the bird's head, Guo Sen subjectively believes that they may not be very smart. But the pyramid outside and this wide cave must have been made for them, which shows that these guys can make strong tools. Moreover, this kind of tool should basically be determined to be a metal product. Then, smelting. Wait, that's not right. Guo Sen counted, and there seemed to be nearly 2,000 bird people gathered here, but he didn't see anything they used to live. Houses, fires, food, various smelting furnaces, warehouses for storing weapons and tools. None. Nothing. There were only densely packed bird heads chirping non-stop. What were they doing? Guo Sen couldn't understand it. Were the caves and pyramids not dug by these guys? Did they just evolve into such low IQ freaks by chance? He suddenly found that the bird heads seemed to be roughly facing one direction, the deepest part of the cave. What was there? Guo Sen's sight continued to move forward for more than 10 meters. He suddenly found something strange. There was a naturally formed stone that looked like a bird's nest, and there were really oval stones similar to eggs placed on it. The strange stone was inlaid with quite a lot of transparent or translucent minerals, which looked like gems. On both sides of this strange stone, 4 statues with bird heads and human bodies were carved. The statues were more than 2 meters tall and were covered with white paint made of unknown materials. There were even black dots on their eyes, which made them look very lifelike. In front of the statues, there were meat, fruits, and other things, which looked quite fresh. Guo Sen also saw that there seemed to be murals painted on the rock wall above the head of the statue. The main body of the mural was white, and the simple lines outlined in black on it detailed how the bird people hunted, ate, and prayed to the gods. The so-called gods were the piles of folk ornament in front of him. Guo Sen seemed to understand what this cave was for. This was a temple from ancient times. The reason why so many bad people gathered here was to kneel down and count out of the ornaments collectively, just like the murals, and beg for good weather. And from the murals, it can be seen that this kind of worship is not a very frequent event. He really encountered it by chance, and his luck was really good. However, they have been shouting for a long time, but haven't started yet. At this moment, a birdman standing in the front of all the birdmen suddenly shouted a few words, and the cave instantly entered absolute peace. Guo Sen immediately used his ability. God gave birth to us, and gave us pain. He is kind, and he is cruel. He gave us the light of love, and dragged the enemy into the abyss. We will destroy what he hates. We will offer what he likes. We are willing to give prey, gems, and everything, and even our lives, to beg for God's blessing. Great Inuit God, please bless us. Please bless us. After the birdman finished a long string of words similar to prayer, the birdmen instantly knelt on the ground, leaned over and pressed their hands on the ground, and prayed in unison. The huge echo also reverberated in the cave, and Guo Sen could feel that the birdmen seemed to be fully devoted to this prayer. They were unable to stand up for a long time, and kept this posture. Guo Sen understood that in their eyes, the Inuit god was the supreme being. good weather, victory in battle, good hunting harvest, etc. all depended on this Inuit god. He began to laugh in his heart. This egg is a god. Then what am I? As a self-proclaimed god, Guo Sen felt insulted. No matter how the egg became a god, it was Guo Sen himself who truly created the conditions for the existence of living things on the planet. Otherwise, let these bird people see what the so-called miracle is. Guo Sen suddenly had an idea to tease them. Chapter 70 Useless Things. Guo Sen still remembered that when he faced the dwarf tribe, he once made a stone statue to play the so-called god of the hill. After using his ability to let his consciousness reside on the inorganic matter, he could even speak and even walk with the stone lump. Now, he decided to use the same trick again to scare these kneeling bird people. My foolish people. A deep and old voice suddenly sounded in the originally peaceful cave. This voice also frightened all the bird people at the same time. This is. The priest's voice trembled, and he raised his head tremblingly and looked around, while the other bird people couldn't even raise their heads. Imminent, your great god. Guo Sen controlled one of the statues, and made it twist its head, and a creaking sound followed. Woo, woo ah. The priest looked at the statue with his face sideways, and when he found that it moved, he was startled, and then he quickly fell to the ground, mumbling and whispering another prayer. The birdmen dared not breathe. Guo Sen saw that the short feathers on their arms were shaking. This was really interesting. It seemed that they were really afraid and respectful of this Inuit god. Great god, Inuit god. The priest looked up secretly and looked at the moving statue with his peripheral vision. After feeling a gaze, he lowered his head quickly. Our offerings to you will become more abundant. Please bless us to hunt more prey and make our tribe stronger. The priest prayed and knelt down to the stone statue. Guo Sen said in his heart, oh, it's true. They already believed that the operation of this world is controlled by gods, and gods can be flattered and appeased. Once gods are happy, they will reward people with a little sweetness. Once gods are angry, they will be punished by heaven. This is a primitive level of belief. This is also more advanced than those witch doctors and priests who pretend to be gods, cast spells to pray for rain and cure diseases, or various related scams. These birdmen have discovered that, even if they don't cast spells, rain and wind will come, trees will grow, and light will spread across the earth. The profession of priest is dispensable. The invisible mysterious force that controls the operation of the world also subdues them. And the combination of power is this Inuit god. My stupid and greedy people, food and hunting are both fun and the meaning of your survival. Guo Sen didn't know what to say. You can't just tell them not to waste their energy here and go out hunting quickly. You can catch more in this time. Great Inuit god. Thank you for your oracle. The birdman priest knelt down, and the other birdmen followed suit. Guo Sen released the control of the statue. It's boring. I thought it would be something, but it turned out to be a deep experience of being worshipped. However, he also learned one thing, that is, this race of badmen seems to have an unusually devout worship of God. This kind of worship seems to be deeply rooted, otherwise they would not have built a pyramid on top and dug a cave below to place objects, statues, and murals for collective worship. Guo Sen looked at the offerings like a small mountain, and then looked at the bird people who were still kneeling and worshipping. He had not seen what the bird people's tribe looked like, but just from some signs in this cave, it can be seen that their civilization seems to have reached a certain level. They have very powerful carving skills, and can carve stones into their own appearance, and even repair boulders into the style of pyramids. The simple murals painted on the stone walls prove that they already have the consciousness of recording, and can also use paintings as symbols of expression to record some things. The pigments used in the murals also show that they already have the technology to extract and make some simple pigments. Among the rich offerings, there are a large number of beast carcasses and strange looking fruits, plus the scale of the pilgrimage of nearly 2,000 people, which all show that this race is talented in hunting and obtaining food. I'm afraid their hunting weapons are also quite advanced. The gems inlaid on the egg-shaped stone prove that they still have quite good mining and smelting technology. That kind of gems cannot be easily obtained if it is not less than a few hundred meters. So many things can be seen just from some facts in the worship site in this cave. The Birdman tribe seems to be a race with a very powerful civilization. It is even much stronger than all the races seen before. Whether in terms of population or various technologies, they are far ahead of other civilizations. Will they become the most advanced ones in the future? After staying in the cave for a while, the people of the Birdman tribe walked out of it under the leadership of the priest. Guo Sen followed closely. He wanted to see what else this strange looking race would have that would surprise him. The Birdman, covered with short brown hair, gradually set out from the cave, stepped onto the rock surface outside, and bathed in the warm light of the stars. Guo Sen was also able to see their complete appearance carefully. In the cave before, they kept moving around, and then they all knelt when they were not moving, so they could not see it as clearly as now. In addition to the various features he had seen before, Guo Sen actually discovered that these Birdmen had wings. He originally thought that the place where the wings should grow had evolved into arms and palms. What he didn't expect was that they also had a pair of small wings with feathers on their backs and the backs of their legs. Could it be that the Birdmen can fly? However, Guo Sen watched them walk for hundreds of meters and went directly into the forest without any thoughts of flying. Decorations? Guo Sen couldn't help thinking so. If they are useless, what is the point of existing? These guys who look like birds and can't fly at all suddenly sped up after entering the forest. Guo Sen saw that their lower limbs seemed to be extremely strong. The front ends of the toes of their feet were bent, which could grab the roots lying on the ground, so that they would not fall down when jumping and moving at high speed. More than 2,000 Birdmen walked in the forest for a while, and then gradually stopped. Guo Sen realized that they might have reached the gathering place. He moved his sight forward, and saw a huge building hidden in the forest. However, he was immediately surprised. Is this a house made of pottery? Chapter 71 Advanced Civilization. There is no doubt that the grey-brown building in front of Guo Sen is definitely not made of mud, but a more solid and non-deformable processed material, pottery. The huge ceramic bricks with a rough and uniform surface are covered with clay and stacked together layer by layer to outline this huge building that is almost oval. Unlike the way of building houses and the impression, this huge collective house of the bird people does not seem to have obvious boundaries. When encountering giant trees, the trunks are used as walls, and the same is true when encountering boulders. The canopy of the tall and dense forest has become a natural barrier, allowing this building with a height of about 3 meters to be integrated into the entire forest. It is also because of this that he did not discover this huge man-made building at the beginning. Guo Sen shifted his sights to the inside of the building. He found that the walls in the 4 directions were made of bricks and stones into houses of different sizes, and the roofs were covered with thick and huge plant leaves. After counting, there were nearly 2,000 of them. This seems to be the location of the bird people's tribe. Compared with other tribes, these birdmen are obviously much more powerful. Think about it, while others still live in straw houses and stone houses, they have already started to burn pottery and live in high-end houses. What a difference in level. After the birdmen entered the tribe from a gate that looked quite beautiful, they each entered a house behind a straw curtain. Guo Sen also noticed that not all birdmen went to the cave to worship. There were also many who did not go there. I don't know why. Could it be that they have something like a sense of hierarchy? This is just a guess. Maybe those who don't want to go. After a while, all the birdmen came out of their rooms and gathered in the square. Guo Sen looked and saw that those who had not gone to worship before also came over, and there seemed to be a few birdmen standing in front of them. Could it be that this Badman's tribe is going to do something? He used his ability. The great god in it has given an oracle. The priest that Guo Sen had seen before stood in the center of the row of people, holding high the wooden staff inlaid with gems in his hand. The birdmen knelt on the ground instantly, unusually neatly. Great Inut. They immediately leaned down and lowered their heads. The voice was as uniform as the sound of kneeling. The oracle says that we must endure trials before we can grow. The priest looked around, and his high voice seemed to carry some sacredness, beyond doubt. Great Inut. The oracle says that chasing what we desire is not a sin, but the meaning of our existence. The priest held up his wooden staff and closed his eyes. Great Inut. The voice was deafening, and it seemed that they were the only ones in the silent forest. Great Inut. Bless us. The priest and several people around him knelt at the same time, shouting the name of their god. Great Inut. Guo Sen was in great pain. This bunch of birdmen, they are really a bunch of birdmen. They are still talking nonsense during a ceremony, and he really doesn't want to hear the phrase Great Inut again. However, he also felt from this that the purpose of the survival of the birdman tribe seemed to be to obtain the oracle from the egg of Inut and transform it into energy for survival. It is this energy that has allowed this race to have the civilization it has today. Guo Sen looked into the tribe. A house that looked like a warehouse was filled with metal spears. Primitive civilizations seemed to like gun-shaped weapons very much. Whether it was the lizardmen I saw at the beginning or even the sheepmen who looked the lowest level, they all used spears that looked similar. With a medium attack range, they are one of the most suitable weapons for dealing with wild beasts. However, Guo Sen always felt that the color of this weapon seemed to have been seen there. The color of the metal spears in the human tribe that once had 500 strong warriors seemed to be exactly the same as this one. Both were shining with dark golden light. Is this some kind of alloy? Or is it made of gold? Moreover, what is the equilateral triangle pattern on the blade of this gun? Guo Sen looked at some other weapons on display in the warehouse with doubts. As a result, he found a bow made of dark golden metal, countless wooden arrows with feathers on the tail, and even short blades. Their workmanship is not rough, and they are even a little exquisite. However, a standard equilateral triangle was engraved on the bow and the handle of the short blade. Guo Sen understood that this should be a symbol of some special meaning. However, he was also sincerely amazed by their metallurgy, forging and even carving technology. The birdman tribe's weapons technology seemed to have far surpassed other races. It is easy to imagine what kind of ending other races would face if they lived on the same continent as the birdman tribe. Guo Sen was very relieved. We are already number 1 in weapons, so what about other aspects? He looked at other warehouses again. A pile of pickled meat jerky as high as a hill and a large amount of powdered light yellow crystals attracted his attention. The crystals were undoubtedly salt, which could be judged from the particles left on the jerky. Haha, even this? It seems that this is not exclusive to the sheepman tribe. Then, pottery. Oh no, even the houses are made of pottery bricks, so there is no need to say more about this. Even without checking the warehouse, Guo Sen knew that the birdman tribe must have a large number of pottery plates, pots, bowls, and pottery ornaments. At this time, the birdmen who had been kneeling for a long time began to stand up and scatter. Soon, a series of ping pong sounds attracted his attention again. Following the sound, Guo Sen unexpectedly discovered that there were quite a few blast furnaces outside this huge building. These blast furnaces looked very similar to the blast furnaces found from the dwarves before, but they seemed to be more exquisitely made and beautiful. The birdmen had returned to their jobs here. Guo Sen accidentally noticed that there were quite a lot of malachite on the ground. This old friend, since he saw it in the White Wolf tribe, he had never seen it in other tribes. Now he suddenly appeared and felt a little friendly. Could it be that the birdmen were going to make copper? However, when he saw them throwing malachite and other stones into the blast furnace and starting to blast and burn it, Guo Sen finally understood what the materials of those weapons were. Copper alloy. Bronze. As an alloy with higher hardness and lower melting point than copper, bronze can be made into various exquisitely shaped ornaments. Wait, this seems to be more backward than iron, this smelting technology. The word alloy seems quite noble, but bronze is far inferior to iron in terms of being a weapon. Iron is much more suitable as a weapon material than bronze. Since these birdmen can make bronze and even mine gems, why don't they smelt iron? Guo Sen checked the underground of this large area and found that the content of iron ore could not be more. He thought of the various exquisitely crafted weapons he had just seen and the egg-shaped stone inlaid with gems in the cave and suddenly had a guess. Could it be that the weapons of the birdmen are not used for hunting and fighting? Chapter 72 Claw Blade. If weapons are not used for fighting and hunting, then what are their uses? There is only one answer. Decorations. Guo Sen looked carefully at the gun tips arrow tips and blades. Sure enough, they have nothing to do with the word sharp, which also verified his idea. But if they don't use weapons to hunt, why do they make these? If they can be made into this shape, they must have been used in this way. He looked at other warehouses again. However, he didn't find similar weapons, but unexpectedly found a strange thing. It was made of bronze in the shape of 5 fingers, hollow inside, and the fingertips extended more than 20 centimeters, extremely sharp, like 5 sharp short blades. Gloves? No, it should be called claw blades. If the seagull claw-like thing is put on the fingers of those birdmen, it would be quite suitable. Could it be that this is their weapon? Guo Sen imagined the look of bird claws on fingers with these claw blades waving. Don't say it, it's quite suitable. At least it's less inconsistent than letting them hold swords, guns, bows, and arrows. Could it be that the claw blade is the most suitable weapon for the birdmen after years of fighting and continuous improvement? Guo Sen looked carefully again. There seemed to be no strange equilateral triangle on the claw blade, and the claw tip was indeed extremely sharp. With a thought, a pair of claw blades floated in the air and quickly made a waving motion. It drew 5 arcs. Squeak. 5 deep scars appeared on the ceramic brick wall of the warehouse in an instant. Oh, no. Guo Sen looked at the blade at the tip of the finger. There was no sign of breaking or breaking. It was still the same. This is awesome. This is the most exquisite, sturdy and sharpest weapon seen in many primitive tribes. This claw blade also proved to Guo Sen the strong strength of the birdman tribe in weapon forging. Compared with them, the dwarves are not worth mentioning, even though they use harder and most suitable iron for forging. After combining exquisiteness and practicality, this extremely powerful weapon represents the civilization of this badman tribe. Soon, dozens of badmen entered the warehouse, skillfully put on these claw blades, and walked out of the tribe in groups of 3 or 5. This confirmed Guo Sen's guess. After they gathered in the open space outside the tribe, they went into the vast forest under the leadership of a relatively strong birdman. Guo Sen was very interested in their hunting. He also wanted to confirm the fighting methods of the birdmen equipped with powerful weapons. His sight followed into the jungle and immediately tracked the birdmen. The birdmen were moving at an unusually fast speed. Rather than going hunting, they seemed to be heading straight for a certain place, and the route was also very clear. Guo Sen followed them, and after walking for nearly 2 kilometers, they suddenly stopped. He also immediately heard a huge roar from the front. Is that a waterfall? Guo Sen raised his sight and found that there was a river not far from them that was not wide, but had a very turbulent flow. It twisted and turned in the dense forest. When it reached the front, it suddenly fell into the huge pit below, forming a spectacular waterfall that went straight to the ground. This wonderful landscape also shocked Guo Senator. Even on Earth, there are few rivers that suddenly become underground undercurrents, right? The bird people came to the edge of the giant pit and suddenly knelt down. What are they doing? The bird people seemed to open their mouths and seemed to be saying something. Guo Sen's mind moved. Great God Kalido. Please. Damn, can you do it? Why are there so many gods? What does Kalido do? Guo Sen thought about it. This is probably about the huge waterfall that fell into the pit. After the bird people finished bowing, they walked around the giant pit for half a circle, came to the other side of the pit, and started moving forward again. After walking for a while, Guo Sen saw that they stopped again. In front of them was a protruding rocky hill standing in the forest. The bird people knelt down. Great. Can you do it? Why are there so many gods? Isn't it good to believe in one? Why do you embarrass yourself? Besides, those are all fake and illusory. The real god is now madly complaining about you. Guo Sen was speechless. So this trip is not just a simple hunting trip, but also a pilgrimage to the places where the gods are? The bird people stayed for a while and left again. This time we should go hunting, right? Guo Sen saw them walking for a while, and they came across a giant tree and knelt down, and a big stone that looked like a steamed bun and knelt down. This is a bit too much. You are too pious. Why do you have so many gods to worship? What can they bless you with? In this way, the bird people went back and forth, and after worshipping a total of 6 gods, they finally came to a low bush forest area. As soon as they stepped in here, they put their claw blades in position. Is it finally the highlight? Guo Sen raised his sights and searched carefully. 2 kilometers away. 73 wild beasts that look like wild boars, but have long reddish brown hair and 4 black and yellow tusks. They are not small in size, and each one seems to be about the same as a rhino on Earth. Could it be that the target of the bird people's challenge is them? Wait, isn't this a bit overestimating one's own capabilities? After counting, there are only 36 badmen in total, which is half of the number of those animals. They are at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. Moreover, there is another fatal point. No matter what, even the strongest lizardmen on the sphere dare not fight such a behemoth alone, or even one on many. Humanoid creatures have their limits. If you want to kill a group of beasts, you must have an absolute advantage in numbers and your weapons must be extremely powerful. In Guo Sen's opinion, if the opponent is these giant pigs, they should at least send a few hundred more people and prepare a pair of bows and arrows for each person. There is absolutely no advantage in close-range claw blades against beasts like these. The premise is that the giant pigs will not use their huge bodies and huge teeth as weapons as they think and become a rampaging chariot. Guo Sen felt that he was worrying a little bit. What if it wasn't the group of giant pigs 2 kilometers away? Maybe it was the yellow-haired mice with single horns that were as big as puppies and jumping around nearby? Or is it a chubby pony-like animal with 6 legs and spotted fur running through the woods? At this moment, great Godanoot, grant us the power to tear our enemies apart. The bird people put their hands in front of their hearts and rushed towards the direction of the giant pig. Chapter 73 Melody of Blood. Guo Sen didn't know how powerful the word faith would be, but if they were basically fighting 1 against 2, and the opponent was a giant pig that was more than 10 times bigger than their bodies, he felt that the IQ of these birdmen must have been gnawed by the husky. Even if this faith could really buff the birdmen, it couldn't bless them to become superheroes, right? Are you kidding? It's almost like these 30 or so birdmen were going to get a giant pig. 1 against 2? Haha. Guo Sen was ready to see a good show. The giant pigs were eating leaves and weeds rich in water. While eating, their triangular ears were twisting restlessly, constantly listening to the movements in the forest. They were used to living in groups, and they didn't think that their huge and powerful bodies could ensure safety. Especially the cubs, they would be protected in the middle by the larger adult giant pigs to ensure that they would not be hit by any danger. A whistle came from the forest. The giant pigs soon noticed this unusual movement. They immediately stopped eating, quickly began to move, and narrowed their range of activities. After surrounding the cubs in the middle, the entire group formed a circle. The giant pigs pointed their fangs outward, lowered their center of gravity, and prepared for defense. Their small triangular eyes stared at the movements around them, and their breathing became heavy. The attackers soon appeared in their sight. For the Godanoot, the bird people who emerged from the dense forest roared again after regrouping in this area. On their hands, the sharp claws shining with dark golden light sent out extremely dangerous signals, and even made the giant pigs take 2 steps back. In this primitive forest where the strong prey on the weak, all unknown element may destroy everything, this is a valuable experience accumulated by animals after tens of thousands of years on the road of evolution. The giant pigs have never seen such an opponent, let alone the horror in their hands. Goo-hoo-ao-ao-ao. The giant pig's noses squeezed out the sounds representing danger at the same time. They shortened the distance between each other and began to prepare, attack or defend, and even look for a way to escape. For the Godanoot, just as the bird people roared again, a giant pig could no longer bear the strange noise they made. After raising its head and howling loudly, it aimed its fangs at them. The muscles on its powerful hind legs were tense, and it burst out with powerful strength. With its huge body, it rushed towards the bird people. Goo-ao-ao-ao. The ground shook violently, like a terrifying weapon that could destroy everything. The giant pig rushed to the bird people in a blink of an eye. It didn't want to stop, and it couldn't stop until it knocked the enemy away and strung them together with its fangs. It couldn't stop. The bird people were obviously prepared for such a strong impact. They also had well-developed leg muscles and extremely light bodies. Even the sparse feathers brought them some greater advantages. In a flash of lightning, A strong wind blew, and the giant pig rushed forward with a strong vibration. It originally wanted to rely on this almost invincible collision to instantly defeat the enemy. However, it did not expect that this attack did not kill any enemy at all. Goao. It finally controlled the inertia of rushing forward, but it did so by crashing into a big tree. The dizzy giant pig just wanted to turn its head and attack the enemy again, but suddenly felt countless severe pains, which instantly bloomed in its back and abdomen. Go. The pain made it sober in the dizziness, but just when it wanted to see the attackers clearly and attack them, it suddenly felt a bottomless feeling of powerlessness coming from its limbs. At the same time, more severe pain came. Blood dyed its pupils red and flowed into its mouth along its fangs. Go. Consciousness gradually faded, and before the giant pig fell down, it finally saw the figures of the attackers. They had already run towards other giant pigs. Bloody slaughter. After seeing the birdman hunters kill the largest giant pig in almost an instant, Guo Sen suddenly felt that he could take back his previous contempt for them. Fast as the wind, moving like lightning. At the moment when the giant pig rushed over, dozens of badmen dodged the attack with extremely agile movements, and immediately followed the giant pig. When the giant pig turned around, they had already waved the blade claws in their hands like golden snakes. Hundreds of dark golden lights flashed, and the giant pig didn't even react at all. Countless wounds were cut open on its abdomen, and its back was torn apart, and blood splashed out like a fountain. The blood quickly turned into a pond under the feet of the giant pig, and after mixing with the internal organs, it looked even more terrifying. After the birdman finally inserted the blade claws into the giant pig's throat, they pulled them out lightly and rushed towards other giant pigs collectively. The entire battle took only a moment. The huge, thick-skinned giant pig became a dead prey. The heroic posture of the bird people made Guo Sen regret his previous thoughts. They were fully capable of killing all these dozens of behemoths. The giant pigs did not know what happened to their companions who rushed out rashly, but it was not their nature to escape and hide when facing the enemy. Goao. In order to protect themselves and their cubs, the giant pigs also started to attack like the previous one. The bird people seemed to be very happy to see this scene. They all took their positions and kept using their vision to confirm the direction of the other party's attack. Some even jumped onto the big tree. It was exactly the same as the previous time. The bird people skillfully danced the dance of death, cutting the skin of the seemingly tough giant pigs with their sharp claws, letting the blood pour out from these huge wounds. The blood gradually dyed the soil red and even merged into a pool. The figures of the bird people kept shaking in front of the dying giant pigs, like the god of death, cutting off their souls and flesh. This was not a battle at all. It was a one-sided slaughter. The birdmen were as fast as thunder and wind, and they were tireless. They quickly reduced the number of giant pigs. From more than 70, there were less than 40 left in an instant. After seeing the tragic death of their companions, the remaining giant pigs also became timid. They no longer chose to rush forward, but formed a circle and gradually retreated. But the birdmen did not want them to do so. They used their agile bodies to sneak up to the giant pigs and used lightning speed to quickly kill one prey after another. The smell of blood became the main theme of this battle, and other animals in the forest gradually approached after smelling the blood. This blood feast seemed to last for quite a long time. Chapter 74 Gifts and Blessings. The pure one-sided killing is boring and dull, even if the fighting talent of the bird people is fully demonstrated in this hunting. Even if this blood feast even attracts the carnivorous beasts in the forest, they have never stopped. Of course, they are not afraid of anything. Those beasts who are greedy for food dare not move forward half a step. Even if they are hungry, they can only watch from afar. No one wants to be the next victim after the giant pig. The animal's unique sense of danger tells them that the bird people bathed in blood are the most dangerous existence in this jungle. Time is unusually slow at this time. The smell of blood is pervasive, and there is no more sound in this large jungle except for the screams and running of the giant pigs. Thanks to the blessing of God in it. Great God in it. However, after there were less than 20 giant pigs left, the bird people did not continue the hunt. They shouted the name of the god in their hearts and let the smaller giant pig cubs return to the jungle. Guo Sen was a little surprised. They didn't kill them all. They obviously had enough power and time to do so. Did they have the idea of ecological balance? Leave the young ones and kill the mature giant pigs, wait until those grow up, and hunt again. Guo Sen thought about it. This should also be considered a kind of animal husbandry, right? For the bird people, when to kill these giant pigs is just a matter of thought. They have plenty of time to do so. After the hunt, what needs to be done is to transport the huge number of prey back to the tribe. However, these bird people alone cannot do this. Even if they have unparalleled combat power, they can't transport. However, a birdman army of 500 or 600 people suddenly approached from the distance of the forest. They seemed to have suddenly appeared, answering Guo Sen's question. Subsequent transportation troops. Guo Sen couldn't help but praise in his heart. This number of people can completely carry away all the fur and bones of the prey. Even if there is no means of transportation, their number can make up for a certain lack. Not long after, the transport troops arrived at the former battlefield. They gathered together, and Guo Sen saw the figure of the priest again. So, the next step will be, thanks to the gift of Godanote, great Godanote. As expected, these devout believers, Guo Sen watched them shouting the name of God over and over again, and suddenly felt that he was in the cave at that time. It seems that the so-called manifestation and oracle really gave them extremely powerful power. At least in terms of psychological suggestion, it has achieved considerable results. After the birdmen performed the routine ceremony, they held sharp blades and began to cut up the prey. The thick fat and skin were cut open, the meat slices were constantly peeled off the skeleton, and the internal organs were thrown aside. The birdmen's movements were skillful and simple, without any unnecessary movements. They sorted the most useful things from the giant pig, meat and fur, at the fastest speed, and discarded the remaining useless things without any delay. Thanks to the gift and blessing of Godanote, the priest had been watching the work of the people. He held up a wooden staff inlaid with gems, and guided the people with a loud voice, after everything was over. Thanks to the gift and blessing of Godanote, 500 or 600 birdmen shouted in unison. Having obtained many prey, their voices were even louder and more powerful. Godanote. Could it be a existence similar to the god of protection and the god of harvest? Guo Sen couldn't help but guess. But seeing how respectful they were, it might be their main god. The birdmen finally carried all the meat of the prey on their shoulders, and returned along the way they came. Guo Sen followed them and couldn't help but look at the former hunting ground that had become a place for blood, bones and internal organs. There were already a large number of carnivores and countless flying insects gathered there. He suddenly felt that this seemed a bit familiar. Yes, isn't that the case with the food chain in nature? This is also the law that has remained unchanged for thousands of years. Whether on land or in the ocean, similar scenes will repeat endlessly. The army of the birdmen moved forward slowly, and their steps were much heavier than when they came. This was probably because the harvest of prey far exceeded their expectations. However, when they came to the boulders, trees, pits, waterfalls, etc. that they had knelt before, they would kneel again as before, and put a small part of the prey nearby as a sacrifice. However, when they walked away, the meat became a delicious meal for nearby carnivores, and the animal skins were torn into pieces, and became a hotbed for insects to gather. Guo Sen watched the birdmen, and watched them finally return to the tribe. They smashed the salt blocks in the warehouse, smeared them on the meat slices that had been processed, and put them on the roof to dry. As for the animal skins, they were hung on the branches with ropes, and left to the wind and sun. The fascia in the meat was pulled out, beaten, and then dried. Guo Sen also understood that this was probably the material for making bowstrings. After observing the series of hunting processes of the birdman tribe, he could indeed understand why the birdman tribe could still survive with such a large population. The almost perfect fighting skills and the most matching weapons made them almost invincible when hunting. The salted meat dried by pickling and drying can maximize the storage time of food and solve this problem. This also allows the birdman tribe to have a more reasonable hunting time, which can save these labors for other work, such as smelting, mining, etc. The civilization displayed by the Birdman tribe is far ahead of any race that GUOSEN has seen before, and it may not be possible for them to catch up for hundreds of years. However, this civilization is not without shortcomings. The population of the Birdman tribe is too large. The forests that almost cover the entire land provide them with an almost unimaginable rich supply of animal resources. However, what will happen if their population continues to expand in the future? If consumption power is greater than productivity, problems will arise. This is almost the same situation faced by the human race with a strong army before. However, the bird people don't have to worry about this happening too early, because the animal resources here are much richer than those of humans. GUOSEN also saw something. That is the so-called sense of crisis. The bird tribe, as an existence, that has almost no opponents in the forest. What will happen if they really encounter some unsolvable problems? For example, what if their tribe is directly dismantled? Chapter 75 The Significance of Migration. The birdmen, who have strong strength and can even make full use of weapons to easily kill the giant pigs, are undoubtedly the most powerful race on this planet so far. No matter from which aspect, the birdmen have almost no weaknesses, and GUOSEN doesn't even need to guide them to do anything. However, with their advanced civilization, they seem to have to face something that they have to pay attention to. The population has reached the bloated level. This tribe of nearly 3,000 people is already extremely large. But from the scope of their hunting, it can be seen that their largest sphere of influence seems to be only within a radius of 15 kilometers with the tribe as the center. Here, there are abundant animal resources, many mineral resources, and even a lot of clay for making pottery. Conservative estimates are that these are enough to support them for a considerable period of time. But what about after that? The population continues to surge, and their hunting range will be further expanded. This seems to be a virtuous circle, but if you think about it carefully, too much population will definitely cause quite a lot of problems. What is the maximum area they occupy? Dozens of square kilometers? Or hundreds? But what about the area of the entire continent? The territory they now occupy is less than 1/millionth of the total area. If they wait for them to spread from the current tribe to another point, it will probably take decades or even longer. But what if they completely split their existing tribe and divide this tribe of 2,000 or 3,000 people into dozens of parts and put them in other parts of this land? Will they be able to take the entire continent in the shortest possible time? GUOSEN felt that it was possible and necessary, if possible. Looking at the places that have been explored on the entire planet, GUOSEN did not find any race that could fully utilize its advantages like the bird people and improve civilization to such a level. When he saw the primitive human tribe with more than 500 troops on the previous continent, GUOSEN really thought that they would be a conqueror. Unexpectedly, those warlike stupid guys seemed to have insufficient IQ and were too confident, so their warriors were all wiped out and lost almost all their combat effectiveness. This also prevented GUOSEN from seeing how they would avenge the lizardmen and conquer the fruit and vegetable paste lovers in a short time. Of course, unifying the entire land was out of the question. However, after coming to this continent and seeing the civilization of the birdmen, his idea was ignited again. If the birdman tribe could take the entire land into their hands in a short period of time and then start researching higher civilizations and technologies, would they become a more powerful conqueror? The answer is almost certain. GUOSEN felt that, even if they were thrown into some corner, they would rely on their strong belief in the innate God and produce a desire for life, and then ignite the entire land with the fire of life. At this time, it was almost evening. The layers of white clouds in the sky were dyed blood red by the light of the stars. Countless bonfires had been lit in the birdman tribe, and they had reached the most relaxing time of the day. The large pieces of meat were cut and strung together with bronze needles. The bird people pulled out some charcoal from the fire and put the skewers on it to grill. During the grilling process, they kept putting salt grains in it, and the salt grains fell on the charcoal, crackling. The skewers of meat with tar and fragrance were constantly sent to the mouths of the bird people. The crispy and tender pieces of meat were constantly chewed in their mouths and then swallowed happily. If it weren't for being the planet consciousness itself, Guo Sen really thought that he was watching the Earthlings eating skewers on the spot. If you add some cumin or chili powder, it would be amazing. However, Guo Sen has never seen similar plants on his sphere. Of course, even if there are, these bird people may not be able to find them. It is quite good that they can find those rock salts in the caves of the mountain stream a few kilometers away. Guo Sen saw that after they finished grilling the skewers, they brought out some round flesh worms as thick as wrists, and several meter-long centipede-like insects. As expected, these birdmen evolved from birds, and they had no resistance to insects. The birdmen seemed to have a special liking for insects, just like eating melon seeds, and threw some things that looked like silkworm pupae into their mouths after just baking for a while. Crunchy, chicken flavor. Guo Sen didn't feel anything. After all, this was meat. It's better than those vegetarians, right? Eat, eat, eat well, eat more. This is also the last time your tribe of nearly 3,000 people will have a collective meal. You will be transferred to various corners of this continent in your sleep to accept new challenges. There, you will have a new life, new challenges, and new opportunities. Of course, these are also accompanied by danger, terror, and even death. While these people were eating, Guo Sen carefully counted all the supplies in their tribe: food, weapons, tools, weavings, and even the bronze spears and short blades they prepared as decorative offerings for the Inuit god. After counting the number, Guo Sen raised his eyes again. He decided to carefully check the specific terrain of this continent and make some adjustments. Compared with other lands, the terrain here is extremely low-lying. More than a dozen not so high mountains, either horizontally or vertically, divide this land into relatively isolated areas. But whether it is a mountain range of nearly 1,000 meters or a hilly area dotted on the side of the mountain like a lump, it is covered by giant trees and long grass that are either red or green and yellow. There is almost no inch of space belonging to rocks, gobi or desert. This is completely different from the scene when Guo Sen separated it from other lands before. Tens of thousands of turbulent and narrow rivers form a network, turning many places on the land into bottomless swamps, and there are also quite a few lakes dotted among them. Countless strange animals and plants live on this almost paradise-like land, forming an extremely complex ecosystem. This of course also brings some troubles to what Guo Sen has to do. If you want to disperse the bird people to various places, there are still many things to consider. But before that, Guo Sen decided to make some changes to the topography of this land. The precipitation in this place seems to be too abundant, and it won't work this way. He moved his mind. The underground rock mass continued to move upward, drilled out of the surface, and brought the soil and forests to the sky. After a long period of deafening sound, hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of land became a plateau area. And those mountains that were less than a kilometer long, Guo Sen also made them grow to more than 3 or 4 kilometers in a short period of time. As for volcanoes, swamps and other places, Guo Sen didn't want to adjust them anymore. What he had to do was to wait for the people of the bird tribe to welcome the night, and then take them on a night trip of thousands of miles. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.